see if this works. Okay, we're streaming. I seen a video inside of a Singapore like content creator like factory.
Okay.
You don't got a mic on, so you should put your mic on.
Let me get the bathroom.
And so like it's just somebody with a gimbal kind of walking through this space, and there are these like offices, and you see like these people have these fake bedrooms set up. It's very 1941, like because they might have like a glass door or a glass wall or something, and so like it'll be a chick who's doing makeup products, and like her set might be like a bathroom, and it has all these like lights that we have, and like our whole setup is there. Like it's a space where you can like rent and have like access to all the electronics and just have a new space that to decorate.
Smart.
But it's very Orwellian because it runs the gamut, you know, like, oh, here's the cool kid who's pretending to be in a bedroom selling trucks for skateboard decks and shit like that, and like so his shit looks like, you know, like that. It's pretty wild.
That's neat. I mean, it's basically a Hollywood set. A lot.
Exactly.
Makes total sense. I'm surprised every city doesn't have multiple facilities like that.
I feel like there's a place here. Like, remember Dan Greenwald?
Yeah,
like that podcast thing that they did? I feel like that's something. That's close to that. All right. So everything is sent. The stream is up. We're good to go.
I'm mic'd up.
Jimmy's
What's the
mic'd up.
language? Are these the lights? The light?
Yeah. Save the bulbs and use that bulb that we had because it'll be fine. I'm gonna run to the bathroom and make a tea, and then we'll be good. Let there be light. What's left in here? Just the
Two
bulbs?
bulbs and this sleeve that the two sleeves that the thing was in.
All right, we'll just put this back there then. Check, check. Just randomly, my one buddy, Jason Scott, is in Japan now, and he's going to be in Tokyo. It's going to overlap a little bit when I'm there. He's the dude that made that documentary on the bulletin board computer systems and the text adventure video games.
Yeah.
Like that's a fun dude, man. I would say that he sold at least 2,000 WYSIWYGs for me in my self-published days with his website. He had a site called textfiles.org. And he's such a massive curator, hoarder, collector that at the end of the day, he got he works for archive.org. And you know they solicited his services after he built his rep, you know, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Like working for archive.org, it like makes all the sense in the world.
Did you send me a link?
Yep. You got it? I just forwarded it from my regular email too. But you should have it.
Yeah, got it.
Shouts to Gabriel Cohn, man, for hooking it up. I'll probably be able to do this, Shadowhawk, and Dragon Ball in one clip. I think the Dragon Ball might be a little big. And then I think the Manhunter will be kind of big also. But I've been able to get the artist editions to about a half hour of a chat, keep the camera moving, keep things breezy. You know, Jimmy, there was on the Kinko's FedEx website. There's a bigger size of these that you could get.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like if we had that for like the artist editions, You know,
How big of a size is it?
good question, but I think it's a foot bigger. I think it goes from like 24 to like 36. I think. I gotta read this Corbin on the plane because I'm going to write the intro.
What is that?
It's called Dimwood. It's going to be the next one of the next books of that series. But it's that wild style from like the murky world kind of style. I mean, it's his last thing. And what's cool is, well, I mean, this is not cool, but just as a document, when it gets towards the end, look at how rough it is, because he didn't get there, you know, like he passed away before he could put the final parts to it. But this style is way different than the rest of the book, and presumably should probably have lettering and stuff. So it's a posthumous work, you know. It's a Tupac posthumous album. Here's hoping that we got some fucking... No, I know that ain't the truth.
No,
okay.
Some inspiring art in this book.
There were faces that look exactly like the Bishop face from one of your comic pages that we were showing off. You know which one I'm talking about?
I think so. Is it the kid when he looks over? There's a picture of the kid like looking out, like right in the camera, and it is not right.
You know, I want to fix that Kayfabe logo a bit. I'm gonna have you lock it again, Jimmy. Should we start promoting Big Apple?
Sure.
All right. Yeah, that's oh shit. We got to deal with again. Hit it. The videos are brought to you by in part by the Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon get access to all the comics that we talk about before anybody else. They get the videos delivered to them before anybody else, and lots of them are hanging out with us in the chat room right now. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos available at your disposal. Some of those videos are even G.I. Joe inspired videos. We've looked at several issues, an artist edition or two. We may have a G.I. Joe playlist, I believe, so check out those episodes. But we might have also talked about your favorite comics. Also, you know what? I'm just going to do this all over again. This isn't locked in either. Okay. Brought to you in part by the Patreon. The King Kayfabers on the Patreon get access to all of our videos before anybody else. Mitigates the kayfabe effect. And the King Kayfabers are hanging out with us right now in a live stream recording session as we produce these videos. We have more than 1,500 videos at your disposal right now, and including a nice half dozen or so G.I. Joe related episodes. So check those out. Pop in the search field, the magnifying glass on the front page of the Kayfabe channel, the titles of your favorite comics. Check out those episodes. And without further ado, well, I guess, Jimmy, we have Big AppleCon coming up a mid-weekend in December.
December 16th.
16th. Man, that's going to be fun, taking a little trek up to the NYC. But without further ado, Jimmy, This is a grail book for me, GI Joe 155, and need to give shouts to Gabriel Cohn who hit me up on the DMs sometime back, man. It was like, dude, do you still not have GI Joe 155? Because he was downsizing his collection. He was doing the Cartoonist Kayfabe Christmas in July stuff, and this was going to be one of the Christmas in July books. Very often when we do Christmas in July, when people are showing off their stuff, I'm like, damn, you could have just sent that to us, man. But this was a grail book for me in a lot of ways. I was at this time I was piecing together the run as it was coming out from the newsstand. Like I really wasn't going to comic shops for this kind of comic. Like when I would go to the comic shops at this time, it's really for like the weird Image comics and things like this. This was very reliable on the newsstand until it wasn't. And it was those last batch of issues that I had the damnedest time trying to find them on the racks. There's the one with like, the original G.I. Joe Colton, like with the the Kung Fu Grip era, the G.I. Joe standing there with a big American flag. That's issue 150, I believe. I had to run around to like find that thing. There's the Ernie Steiner issue, which is 154, the one right before this. I seen his artwork and seen the comic at his table. It was the first time I saw original art. It was at a toy show at the old Expo Mart, and could not find that comic to save my life. He had to spend the 4 weeks of that month that it was on the rack, scooping it up. And G.I. Joe 155, in a house full of 5 people, where my parents are constantly going to the grocery stores and various grocery stores and cutting coupons and going to Giant Eagle and the Shop and Save and this one and that one, I could not find this comic ever. And very quickly, it was like $8, $10. Now it's like $100. It's a very expensive comic because of the scarcity of it. This is the end.
I wonder what happened that the numbers fell off that kind of rapidly.
We got old, like we were the audience for this stuff, and like you're older than me, so you were out of it way before I was, and I was holding on, and I can't be blamed because I was buying all the toys still. Like when they started to do the fucking Street Fighter 2 figures and shit, we bought those. When it was all ninjas, like the new waves were all fucking ninjas, we bought those. So me and my brother were not the problem. It was that you guys were the OGs, and now you guys got hair on your nuts and girlfriends and shit like that. So it just completely shit the bed. But Larry Hama showed up every month reliably, man, to give us good comics. And this, it's great that they gave him, an end notes, allowed him to tie things up. And I think that he put a lot of effort into this one. He famously is an issue-to-issue guy. He doesn't know what the fuck's happening, and he'll reintroduce characters that die, and then people be like, "Hey, he's supposed to be dead," and he go, no, he was on a mission." He was, he's a mensch, man. He don't give a fuck about that kind of stuff. But it does feel like he had a real point of view with this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the end of 1994. I see a December down there for some context of just the comics market itself. At this point, it is spiraling downward.
Yeah, that makes so much sense too. Because I remember when I got that issue 150, and it would have been summertime, like on a family vacation, not in Pittsburgh. The dudes on the 1s and 2s, you have Philip Gazier and Scott Koblish on the inks. These guys were doing the comic pretty routinely around this time, and it's a wonky style. You get the vibe that their natural drawing style is probably not that of the Wildstorm Studios, but they were maybe tasked with trying to add some of that hyperbole into their artwork, and it comes off all wrong and weird and wonky.
Yeah, I made the comment before we started recording about how kind of inspirational art.
Yeah.
And that, like, going through this, I would feel like at the time, oh yeah, I can do that.
Right.
Like it's not that far off from the stuff I was drawing that I look back on and go, yeah, that's not right.
I mean, this is almost like that Bishop face right there, actually.
Yeah, we'll see a couple that are really out there, but I thought about it too. Is this a situation where like we're watching an artist who learned to draw from comics?
Right, and maybe he broke in by having these Jim Lee marks.
Yeah, it would make sense. And you can almost see where the panels are of like, okay, go for it, or this is the first thing we all learn to draw. There's a couple of those standouts, but then other stuff a little bit weird, possibly a little rushed.
Right. So we got a guy who's having a flashback, and who this dude was, man, he was fighting right alongside Stalker, Snake Eyes, like the core cool team guys, but he ends up being a part of that for the Fred series. I don't know how deep you read into G.I. Joe, but like there would be like Fred 5, Fred 7, and they all got facial surgery to be these ginger guys. And I think the idea was that it's Cobra Commander face, man, but you have 5, 10 of these guys, and one of these guys hides as Cobra Commander. It's the Cobra Commander with the Darth Vader helmet.
Okay.
You know that one? So they were liberated and reprogrammed into being good citizens, pulled from Springfield. But one of Fred's sons wants to go off, join the military.
And Dad is not in favor of that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because he would be that generation. Like it's after the silent generation of 18-year-old boys in World War II who were killing people. He's like Vietnam era.
Yeah, exactly. Which speaks to Larry Hama.
Absolutely, and this comic is rife with all of the shorthand, like the stuff that would be in the glossary section in the back of Nom Comics is all used here. And Hama would be good with that, using that stuff and even setting up some of the formations and stuff that would be used.
Yeah, they start off there with Point Man. This guy's on the point.
Right.
I can remember, I went through a period of reading war books,
Mm-hmm.
and I can remember reading one, and it was called Point Man. And that's what you would get is like, you could only do it for a little bit of time because it's like pure awareness of everything. Right. And everybody behind you counting on you.
Right. Fred encourages the boy, go send a letter to Snake Eyes. You think he's so cool, which is perfect, right? Because like Snake Eyes is the Boba Fett of G.I. Joe. Oh, Snake Eyes is so cool. It's almost like Hama's talking to the kids at home. There's famous conversation too about Hama being at a party, like a Tops party or something, and Art Spiegelman accusing him of celebrating fascism and stuff in his G.I. Joe comics. And this would be in front of like Howard Chaykin. Chaykin, when we got dinner, he was talking about like, yeah, that motherfucker like said that Larry Hama, a dude who actually served in the army, is celebrating fascism in this comic. So I wonder if like some of that is in the back of his mind, because this is a strictly anti-war story that we're dealing with right here. Stalker showed up to the pit. Got to give the password. It's funny, for all the high technology and hyperbole of the G.I. Joe pit, you just got Spirit kind of guarding it, requiring a password before you can proceed down the steps. Never more 90s ads than these ones, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah, wow.
Do you imagine this is hand lettered?
Like I do think it is. Yeah, I'm looking at it, and I would say definitely.
I think that's amazing. I would like to know. Yeah. It feels like Chris Chua's art style.
I'll agree with that.
So the guys are pulling apart the pit headquarters.
Let's take a second here and think about why G.I. Joe is not selling anymore. And we'll get a better view of it later. But what in the hell is Scarlett's, like, what are we wearing?
Yeah.
Like it's a bummer because you don't see, there's a tail to this costume or a train or something. Yeah. What is this?
This, the Snake Eyes that you bought as a kid was not the Snake Eyes that I bought as a kid. And every season, if it was like a breakout character, they would have to put them out again. And truthfully, the girl toys did not sell much. No. So this might be the second Scarlet toy, and it was like required at that time. But this is where their head was. It was neons. It was fluorescents. The Eco Warriors.
It's bizarre.
And the cartoon that was on at this time, it was not Nowhere to Run, Nowhere to Hide. It was Got to Get Tough, Yo Joe. It was a whole different song and stuff.
Yeah, I missed out on all of that.
Yeah. So they're tearing the pit down. Also, something very noteworthy. I don't know where they're at now. I know that Kirkman has the G.I. Joe license.
Okay.
But I do know that IDW put out an issue 300 written by Hama. So like once they get to 310, he did as many issues away from Marvel as he did with Marvel. That's kind of an interesting thing. They're getting there.
It's fascinating. Like going through this, my thought was, when people ask about like what could be a grand design, G.I. Joe's the perfect comic for a grand design, especially since it's mostly one guy's vision behind it in Larry Hama.
Yeah.
It may not fit perfectly, but it would still be somewhat of a story that would be sensible, that would kind of all fit together.
Totally. This this is the very first time. So Snake Eyes receives his letter from the young Fred offspring, and he's reading the letter here. The kid's talking about being hyped up on war and wanting to join the military.
By the way, that Snake Eyes costume, not so sure about that. I can't even figure out like what this is. It looks like the flattest piece of something, and there's thread on it. Like you're gonna undo your fly.
It's a corset.
It looks like metal.
Right.
That's a weird choice.
Yeah, it's some Black Queen Hellfire Club gear, man.
Very bizarre.
You know, the dad doesn't talk about his war or anything. And it's that classic thing where like his parents are yuppies. He just has such disrespect for his dad. Doesn't know the hero that his dad is. Yada yada. But what we're getting here on this page, which is pretty fun for the young G.I. Joe readers, it's the first time you get Snake Eyes dialogue or conversation or anything. We actually have the words of Snake Eyes in this piece. We're still going. And he is going through the people that we saw kind of in that earlier setup of the first couple of pages. He's going through these different team members of their platoon, the things that got them interested in war. Hit that. And the sort of outcomes of each of these guys. And as you can see, all the outcomes are bad. They make it a point that, you have Stalker, you have these guys whose names you know, but here are the guys whose names you don't know. These are the Star Trek red shirts, the dudes that are with us in battle and step on a landmine. This guy joined the military to have a steady income to pay for his dad's heart valve surgery. Dad dies while he's still off the war, but he stays he doesn't go AWOL, steps on the damn landmine. We have Stalker, raised in a super tough neighborhood, using this opportunity to kind of get himself out of a bad situation. You got to have your Storm Shadow, who's raised in a family of ninja, and it's sort of all he knows kind of thing.
Yeah, he's not looking for heroism there. That is a practice for him.
Right.
I think this is a really good story.
Yeah.
I have not read most G.I. Joe comics, right. So I came into this week very cold.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's designed that way.
It sets up, man. It's like a done in one, and going back to the same group, that same, I don't know what team or whatever. It's a great device for a story. Get to see it from a couple different point of views. Yeah, I think it's a really well done story.
We're gonna have the Snake Eyes origin here, getting burned up, getting his vocal cords fried and stuff. And this part right here, one of them, his name was Travis, kept begging me to smother him with a pillow.
Yes, very dark.
Yeah, and you imagine that this almost everything within these pages feels like something that could be a first-hand account, something that Larry Hama experienced with somebody while out kind of in the trenches.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine the stories you would really have if you went through Vietnam in combat. So we could do an episode on the absurdity of this page.
Right.
Like, seriously, it's insanity that this is what you would have. Everybody's wearing dark muted colors, earth tones, except right in the middle we have a half-naked girl in neon. It's such an absurdist concept, and I get it. It's a comic book, and it's out there. But at the same time, you think about this is a failing property,
right?
Not surprised. You know what I mean? That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, totally. And the complaints that Hama would have would be stuff like this. There's the Zartan that's like the bright orange and all this, and they would create a new wave of toys, and then you have to get them into the comic, and then they have to look the way they do in the toys that you can currently buy. So they're bound by these dudes who are pulling from the well one too many times, and they're getting older. Like, they were old dudes whenever they started coming up. I was just watching that episode of Toys That Made Us, and these guys were doing war gaming and shit in the 60s. So this is what passes for what the kids of the 90s might like.
It also illustrates, yeah, just totally thinking of like, okay, Jim Lee's #1. How do we make this? How do we try to get some of that magic from the Jim Lee? And like, this is your critique. This is your, let's distill what makes Jim Lee so popular. And this is the answer.
Right.
Nah, you guys missed the mark.
There's something real ghastly about the way he builds these faces, man.
Yeah, the faces are the part that whenever I said this is inspiring in a lot of ways, it's the faces. And the best one is coming up. I'll point it out whenever I see it. But this one is the right model. It's like something's just wrong there. And yet I've drawn 10,000 faces that look about like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. It's so weird. It's almost like you learn to draw faces with cartoon language, but then whenever you're drawing in a more realistic style, it just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if Joe Mad is out at this point. I think he is. I think when I got my G.I. Joe 150, I think that would be like a Phalanx Covenant type era where it's the first Joe Mads. Here's another one where she's like really pops against all the earth tones. So they're retiring the pit base.
This is the face that I love.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've drawn a face that looks like that.
I know what you mean.
And especially when I was like in this era, like in the 90s, trying to do sample pages, that's what my characters look like. And I can't even tell you why. When I look at that, I don't see Joe Mad or Jim Lee or Rob Liefeld. I don't know what it is, but that's what I was drawing to.
Totally. There are the eras of, like, and you see them in like the Power comics, the Outlaw comics of the 80s, and the comics of the 90s. So like the 80s ones, I always called them equine, horse faces. They were like these long, narrow things. And those are a result of Dude's Crib and Barry Windsor Smith. It's like that, and like really Barry Smith, like the earliest rounds of Conan comics. So like the Peter Lairds, think of that kind of style. And so many of the Outlaw comics that we look at from that era have that kind of thing. But then this, I do think it comes from like it's the Jim Lee approximation or something. Though he's never drawn a face like this, but whatever we were pulling from to like learn to draw, they all turned out this way in the 90s.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. This is kind of interesting for doing your chain link, is like, you know, you would draw a little bit of it to imply the whole thing, but very bizarre. Like I would feel like if you were doing that and it was just a line, you could get away with it.
Right.
But the way that's drawn, it's very
it looks like a broken fence.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not that's not the way to do it. And with that much work that you did, why not just complete it?
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty odd looking.
Yeah. Also, man, we're getting to the end of the book, right? So deadlines are a cruncher. But there's your last page, dude, and it goes away. And it was shocking to me that it went away, because like I had no sense of anything as a kid of like popularity. Like it's just like I'm getting what I want, and why am I not seeing new G.I. Joe, figures? And we were buying them all. Like we got the Major Blood that had like the metal helmet with the red eye patch and stuff. Like all the last run, I those are the ones that I still have like real easy access to, and we still bought them, but like we could kind of tell that it looked weak. But it was a shock when we get the announcement that G.I. Joe is done, and you just feel like it's forever. Like, it's just going to be done for forevermore. The Dark Horse one comes out reasonably soon after this, a year or two, but then it is about 4 or 5 years before the Devil's Due Josh Blaylock era happens, because that gets announced when I'm at art school, and a lot of people were salty about that. But then there was like Image had it for a tiny piece, and Hama comes back with that one, has Dan Jurgens draw it. Like I have those, and those are the last G.I. Joe comics that look kind of like the classic Marvel, as you can imagine. The way Dan Jurgens draws and stuff has painted covers, so you go through the long boxes, you'll skip them because the covers just feel like any of that newer kind of crap. But reliably, like they started the series up again with like 155 and a half or something, and then they started 156. He did issue 300 with IDW. That was a big deal. And now I don't know if they started coming out yet, but I do know that Hama's on the hook for the Kirkman Skybound shits. So
that's so interesting. Hama has that association with the property.
Yeah,
because you assume like if the licenses are expiring, probably the sales aren't great, right?
And it's it's like, dude, it's like Savage Dragon. Like you do not see these books on the wall. These are subscriber books now.
Right.
There's 2,000 of them at a print run or something. Very small numbers. But maybe because like Kirkman's one of us, he knows the potential. I bet you he's going to push it. I bet you he's going to do some hype to, because like really it's the art. Like the art is very uninspiring.
I wonder who comes on board on the art side of it.
Yeah, it's IEW. Like, what are they paying? You know, and they're getting commensurate artwork for the money that they're paying. Neil Adams drawing Cobra Commander. These would be these dossiers. This would have been published in probably issue 108, I believe. They would have like a full image. I do remember George Perez doing the Baroness one, which is like perfect. And they have like a little dossier that's like a the back of the toys, you know, like the little file card, except a little bit more robust. And then did you read this part right here, man? Coming next issue, even though there won't be a G.I. Joe 156, we still have one more ace up our sleeves. Years back, a young guy named Todd McFarlane penciled an issue of G.I. Joe. It was number 61, in fact. For whatever reason, the story was redrawn by another artist, happens to be Marshall Rogers, and Todd's version was never saw print. So shipping the second week of December, after 8 weeks, 8 long years in a drawer, they're going to pull out that comic, and it's inked by Mark Nelson. We did an episode on these comics, one of those rare comics where two people drew the same script, and the sort of panel layouts, like the number of panels and things, it's the same amount. So maybe, you know, it's Larry Hama creating roughs or whatever, like panel designs and stuff. So we have a video where we compare the Marshall Rogers G.I. Joe number 61 with the Todd McFarlane G.I. Joe 61. Todd was fired by Larry Hama. Just this past weekend, I was talking with Jeff Darrow, and he brought up that issue 60 of G.I. Joe that we looked at with a splash page where Lieutenant Falcon is standing 10 feet away from the guy he's talking on the walkie-talkie to. And we were just kind of like laughing about that stuff. And he was like, I don't know why nobody caught that before print, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they might have caught it after print because Todd McFarlane drew the next issue, but it never came out until, you know, years later. He got chucked. But
it's so interesting that they go to the well as like their last G.I. Joe project at Marvel here. Let's dust off the McFarlane and see if we can sell a few of those.
And you know what the cover was? Homage to Spider-Man 1 with Snake Eyes down in that, and it was this Koblish guy or Phil Gautier doing this best McFarlane impersonation. So I want to give shouts to Gabriel Cohn for hooking it up. When I was doing solo vids going through G.I. Joes, I was saying like, oh, I don't got 155. Missing a couple other little sporadic issues here and there, man. But this is a series that was near and dear to my heart, something I always paid real close attention to. You got a good exit note too, exit editorial by Larry Hama here, which is good value.
Yeah, calls out all his creators and stuff. Ernie Steiner missing from the list of pencilers, by the way.
Yeah, you know how this goes, man. Like, this was in production. He probably wrote this thing before that issue came out.
Yeah, I don't believe there was any slight intended there or anything. You know, it's interesting. I see so many G.I. Joe issues in dollar bins and stuff, and it makes me wonder if part of the issue here was they lost distro to like army bases or something. You know, somewhere where they were selling, you know, enough to keep G.I. Joe a good book for them must have been lost.
You know, a big part of that is it's the only comic to ever have television commercials. This was the highest selling comic. Like, first it was Star Wars, kind of saved Marvel Comics, and then come 82, like having a commercial on TV, it was a way for them to skate around some of the laws related to toy commercials, because there were no laws for advertising books. So those commercials sold fucking millions of copies of G.I. Joe at a time. You could find the old like postal receipts and that little paper that would be sent out to advertisers and stuff, and it would be close to 1 million copies at times. Now they had to cut Vig into Hasbro, but I'm sure that they weren't crying about, you know, the money that they were still keeping.
Yeah, I wonder how all that works. Like with that kind of circulation, Marvel's profiting from the advertising they're selling. So that would be one thing that would be, you know, have you could cash in on those numbers.
Yeah. I'm sure. You know, 1 million, of unit sales, just the nickels and dimes that you make from that. I got to revisit the original drawing, because that is fucked up. Like, that is not, the paste up fell off or something.
Yeah, I wonder even like, what are you paying Neil Adams for that? got to be one of the highest rates of someone you're going to hire to draw. It's super cool to see Neil Adams draw Cobra Commander, but I do wonder, like, how on earth does that come about?
Yeah.
So out there. I think Larry Hama had some ties to continuity.
Oh yeah, he did.
So maybe just some money came in to get this kind of work, and it was like pitch a little bit to your to the guys you're close to.
Neil Adams could flip this stuff like flapjacks too, something like that.
Right.
I've seen him draw a time or two. Good to go?
I am.
You're probably gonna have to close it out, open it up, and then. The back cover is good. You got that Shadowhawk, Jimmy? I want to play this composition just a little bit more. I'm going to pull it up more. We're getting a little kind of close.
Yeah, dude, it's slick. Look at how slick that is.
Yeah, lock me in, man. Yeah, I like that dull gray. I was very, very nervous that it was going to be so shiny and stuff, but I know that we never directly hit the light anyhow. But like that dull black is pretty freaking sweet. We should probably just do the color. I feel like because like the color might be dull. We got to test that out, color on color, and see if like there's a grayness.
I'm gonna have color on both of mine because that comics scene is not that colorful.
Man, I can't wait to have that. That's gonna be a big talk. I think there's so much to say because like there was research that I was doing independently the past week that I'm gonna be able to talk about with that in relation to the Hollywood stuff, like with the Batman movie, that Michael Uslan guy and stuff. He's an interesting fella, and I think I could get him. He's the guy who owns the rights to the film rights for Batman and has owned them since the 70s. He's just a dude.
Wow.
He's just a dude, man.
That's nuts.
That made a play. Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and he has Swamp Thing as well.
It makes a lot more sense now why we have like 14 Batman movies coming out all the time, right?
Yeah, he's had his hand in that all the time. You could see his name on all that stuff. And it was actually not a nice reason why I was searching for him, because he was on that Dark Knight Returns documentary, and I just found him pretentious, and I'm like, who is this fucking douchebag? Who is this whack? Because he was also on the Bill Finger. I rewatched the Bill Finger last week, and I'm like, he seemed cooler there, and he had more stripes in that one because he went to like the first Phil Seuling con and saw Otto Binder, and Otto Binder's like, want to meet the guy who created Batman, and little Michael Uslan thought he was going to see Bob Kane, and like met Bill Finger at like convention number 1 of like Phil Seuling. So I'm like, okay, this guy at least has stripes, because like I was pushing back against him because what he was saying about the graphic novel was so pretentious and hyperbolic, you know. Good to go. That's locked up. They got a fucking. But I've seen him float around on a Facebook, so I'm gonna reach out. Cartoonist Kayfabe is brought to you in part by the Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on our Patreon get access to all the videos before anybody else. They're hanging out with us in a live stream recording session as we produce these videos. Gives you guys a big leg up on the Kayfabe effect so that you get these books that we talk about early. We have more than 1,500 videos in our filmography as we speak. It turns out that we have videos on every other Image #1 comic from that early round, but we don't have a Shadowhawk #1, so you can check out all of those videos. But more importantly, why don't you take a search on the front page of the Kayfabe channel, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite titles, and check out those episodes. We're going to be at Big Apple Comic-Con December 18th? 16th. At the end of this year. So if you're in the NYC region, or you're a Bridge and Tunnel kind of character, come say hi to the kings of Cartoonist Kayfabe. And without further ado, Jimmy, let's sell some Shadowhawk comics.
I'm sitting here on the side and there's light, and I see that this embossed says "Who is." I never noticed that before.
You know what else is funny? Because of the light, right? The contour of the face, I always thought that this was just flat. I mean, I had this comic for 30 years. But no, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Hey man, let's start a minute on this cover, because this is the Image launch, right?
Yeah.
This is one of those initial books, and Valentino's not the heavy hitter in that lineup.
Right.
This is a great cover. You know, if you're going to do a little bit of a gimmick with the silver foil and whatnot, silver, red, and black, pretty striking. And I mean, just a giant close-up of the helmet. I think it looks great as a cover. For an intro to a character in a new book when you're competing with some heavy hitters around you, well done.
They were pulling out the bells and whistles for Valentino because he wasn't the strongest. You have Rob Liefeld who sold, 6.5 million. You have Todd McFarlane that sold, 2 point whatever million of Spider-Man. You had Jim Lee who sold 8 million of X-Men #1. Those guys all get the $1.95 issue #1 that has no bells and whistles to it at all. The Liefeld stuff had the little trading card that came on the inside, kind of piggybacking off of the trading card piece with X-Force. So they're pulling out all the stops to kind of get Shadowhawk over. And Shadowhawk was a cult hit, man. A lot of it is thanks to that skateboard that was like in Hill's department store. Like that thing was, because it's this, it's a super, super striking image. And then you hear that like he's the superhero that breaks backs. One of the reasons why this was like kind of a cult book, I couldn't find this one easy as a kid. Plenty of Youngbloods out there, plenty of Spawns out there. But this was a chase book. This was the last one of that original crew that I was able to get my hands on. Probably second to Cyberforce, which is also not an easy one for me to get because I came to Image a little bit late.
It's so surprising that any of them would be rare, because I don't know what this sold, but it must have been 750,000.
Hundreds of thousands for sure.
This was an era when almost all the Image #1s were selling nearly 1 million copies.
Right.
And this is first wave, so I'm sure it did a ton of sales. It's funny that there was ever any scarcity with any of the Image #1s.
Yeah. Some of it was interest level as well. I wasn't chasing the idea of the backbreak. If it didn't have the idea of the backbreaking thing to 6th grade, 7th grade Eddie P, I never would have gotten it. Because just that idea of destroying dudes' spines and stuff was 90s badass. That's that 90s angst kind of stuff.
I think that's pretty interesting too, how far he goes from Guardians of the Galaxy, the book that he's doing at Marvel whenever Image happens, to this. It's almost like he sat down and went, what can I sell? What would be a great book? What would be a big book? Because you're right. It's the 90s, it's the violence, it's the action. Let's have a vigilante that breaks backs. It sounds badass.
He has a very classic style, and I think it is noteworthy to see the classic style with the lighting and the spotting of blacks and stuff. With the computer coloring. That was something that I always kind of made note of whenever you would get, Wildstar with Jerry Ordway and Al Gordon. Man, I can't wait to see what the computer coloring looks like over top of that, or Mike Grell's Shaman's Tears. This is the kind of art aesthetic that is within that approach to me.
Yeah, and look at Eric Stevenson on board as an editor at this point. Is this the first Image book that Stevenson works on? And again, is he
Youngblood.
11?
It's Youngblood 2. Which might have the intro to Shadowhawk in the backups. If it's not 2, it's 4, because Pitt is 3. I think it's 2.
2 sounds about right.
But
I wonder, I wonder when it was released.
Yeah.
Youngblood 2. And I also wonder, do you think he's working out of a studio? When we talked to Valentino or Liefeld, one of them, they definitely shared studios at different points. I wonder if they're sharing studios here that he's thanking some of the Extreme guys. Seems like he must be around.
Right. Yeah, I think they were OC dudes. I remember Eric Reynolds from Fantagraphics worked the shop at the shop that Valentino would shop at, and he said the story that at one point in the late 80s or something, Valentino said all this stuff I'm gonna go to Marvel, I'm gonna make Guardians of the Galaxy a hit book, I'm gonna do this. Everything that Valentino said came true from the comic shop, and those guys were dismissing him or something.
Man, whenever you go back further and think that way, super thoughtful creator. Because I remember the thing with Guardians of the Galaxy, I was buying it when it's coming out, it was so clever. Like, it wasn't a pull book for me. It wasn't one that like I'm going to buy every issue. It was like I'd be on the spinner rack. I'd see the new issue. It'd be something Captain America's shield in the 31st century. You know, Ghost Rider. Like it was so smart in the sense of like every issue was selling that book.
Right.
And it feels like, you know, there's a similar treatment here.
They gave him, on that book, just another aside, like they gave him a lot of push when he was pulling out Guardians of the Galaxy, because the summer annual crossover called the Corvette Quest or something was all about the Guardians of the Galaxy. And you could not escape them at that time. And then it was right at the time for the #1. So here we are for Shadowhawk. We have the trope, right? Like we're gonna start keeping note of that. We were looking at Cosmic Odyssey where Batman had the trench coat and had to call people on the phone. You have Shadowhawk with his Humphrey Bogart Private Eye Maltese Falcon outfit.
Do we get a panel of him with the hat?
I don't think so, because I'm very curious how the helmet works too.
Yeah. There should be like little holes poking out on those like ears.
It really has such a Wolverine vibe to a lot of this. But look at it. I mean, for all the hyperbole of Image Comics artwork, every blow lacks Marvel dynamism or Image dynamism. It's all like the moment of impact and not like the follow through. Kind of boring looking. Like imagine what Simon Bisley would do with a panel like this. Like just have the head touch the back with the butt cheeks, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, because that is very tepid. I mean, that looks like foreplay. That looks like you know, those fellas that are, you know, trying to bet each other on who could take the fist deeper. You know, that's lovemaking in some houses. Valentino with the hatching, you know, like totally piggybacking off of that Jim Lee kind of style of hatching. One of the few Image Comics dudes to draw some backgrounds, and they are the classic. It's like the John Romita Spider-Man Daily Strip backgrounds.
Kind of an interesting choice too is he's writing out the page numbers on each page.
Yeah.
And I assume that's his hand. It looks different than the lettering.
Yeah, who his wife is doing the lettering, which is pretty cool. She's
I do
a nice
like
big style.
That he is doing the inks and everything. Because as Shadowhawk goes on, he'd bring in like Chance Wolf and, you know, felt like it was a little bit less of his hand, but this one is like all Valentino, right? Like this is the launch. This is putting your eggs in the basket and going for it.
I think he drew this quick as fuck. Like it looks like there's like a lot of little shortcuts being taken here. I was looking at how he builds that leg and stuff. Like if you remove this color, like it's a very raw style. Like these backgrounds, like we showed off our submission pages and shit. Like we had backgrounds almost exactly like this, with the windowsills like that, drawn every brick kind of thing.
He might have still been doing Guardians of the Galaxy when he's doing this issue, because I think
remember
that Marvel basically kicked everybody who was at Image out. Because I think Liefeld planned on staying there and seeing through some of the Cable stuff, and I think Valentino planned on staying there. You know, Family Man, it's one thing to let's try something new and I have indie roots, but it's another thing to be like, let's just go in this new direction.
Yeah.
And I think Marvel took that choice away from them, but at this point he may have been doing 2 books at a time.
Yeah. If you recall some of our Wizard coverage, he says as much, because he actually was still there when those guys kind of burned the boats.
I think that lettering, this blows my mind.
It's
that you
terrible.
would cut up words that way. That's really odd.
It's terrible because it gets dicey in certain spots, especially, you know, knowing who Shadowhawk is underneath his helmet, and it's a terrible decision. It lets you know, like, so Eric Stevenson, editor, like he didn't quite do his job, because like you could easily have, you don't have the A because you already have it there, you know. Nightmare Walking, you could have like 2 versions and put something in between to offset it.
It's strange.
It's terrible.
I think it's very strange.
But like that second row is not too much thought being put into the mixture there. All that said, I bet you could sell this page for 5 figures.
Yeah, I would hope so. And you know what? That opening scene, like, we wasted no time. I'm here to see a vigilante break people's backs.
Yes.
Great. Don't give me the issue of setup where I now have to buy issue 2, although maybe if you're trying to sell books, that's the way to do it. But they come right out of the gate with it, and that's what I want.
Yeah, totally. He's given us money shots, man, for like what Jim Valentino can do and accomplish. He's given it to us, and he is from the classic tradition of comics making. So he's not skimping on these backgrounds. These are the comic book backgrounds, dude.
I do. I like this a lot. I was going through it this week, and it's like, this book's a lot better than I remember it.
It's pure
in a lot of ways.
It's pure like comics. So it's like, you know, it's like a little brownstone amongst at the same height as like skyscrapers and stuff. You know, the geography of it is nuts.
There are elements that remind me of the Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stuff. Like there's a rawness to it. And in hindsight, like at the time, I don't know that it stood out that much. But in hindsight, it's like, you know what? I like that.
Valentino, in terms of the writing, he is able to inject a universe here, introduce us to the cops, introduce us to a bad guy, and that is like
he's an arsonist. What should we call him?
How about arson trademark? Trademarking the word arson. Like this is the stuff that Don Simpson, when he's doing Splitting Image, and they're calling out titles. There's always a TM next to things. Got the cod piece with double lighting on it.
Of course.
With digital chameleon fucking flourishes.
There's double lighting, all kind of hatching, and also like white highlights.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, look at this dude's package, is what we're saying. There are even directional devices that are all going to it.
He looks like that Charlie 27 or whatever that character's name is from Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of that big flat head like Road Pig or something. He has the kayfabe guns that look like Super Soakers from that era. And but you know, he's a bad guy with a heart. You end it with, oh, come here, little Poochie, and you just see him doing that blockbusting thing, that stuff that you hear about with like you know, old tenements, the old Bronx shit, like cashing in on insurance money.
Yeah, I think story wise, it's pretty good. You know, like concept wise, this stuff all fits together. You can see how this dude is clearly lining up against Shadowhawk.
Yeah, totally. So so you're introducing your villain, the people of the town, watching the burning stuff going down, the sort of eccentrics from the neighborhood, making it a universe book. You know, you got to get the Youngblood characters in there.
And it's poured on so thick. You know, that lady, I think like one of her sons or nephews or somebody had died of drug overdose. So of course she's hardlining against these your street gang, and of course Shadowhawk's watching. You know, you got to have the inciting incident.
I love it, man, because like this lady, it's like when I was a little dude growing up in Homestead, I had a lady that I called Grandma Washington. I thought she was my grandma. She's a black lady, and I didn't know how all that stuff worked. And I would be at school, I have 4 grandmas. And so Grandma Washington, she would walk the streets of Homestead, like just doing what she has to do, go shopping or whatever. But she carried a baseball bat with her.
Wow.
Just with her, a wooden fucking baseball bat with her.
Principal style.
Yeah, totally, man.
This is some pretty strange drawing on her. And then also the coloring. Like, look at that colorist being like, I don't know what we do here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I've run into that too. Like making comics where like you almost paint yourself in the corner and it's like, ooh, I don't know what you do with this. There's a pretty good money shot for you.
Totally. He's got the treasure trail on the tummy right there, man. Welcome Dale. Could that be Dale Keown? I think so.
Sounds right.
If Shadowhawk shows up in Youngblood 2 and Pitt shows up in Youngblood 3, I think so. Cool gauntlet ideas right there. It's a cool costume design. It's perfect for the 90s. We were on board for that.
Man, that helmet, I can't not see Wolverine in that helmet.
Absolutely.
And I just think, like, was this a pitch at some point? Like, was he going to maybe throw out an X book? Or what if Wolverine joined the Guardians of the Galaxy issue? You know, something with this futuristic Wolverine helmet.
The amount of Wolverines, because like Rob Liefeld had 2 Wolverines. He had that one troll, so that's the maskless Wolverine. And then he had that Dreadnought, maybe was his name. He was in Bloodstrike, and he was the Red Wolverine.
You know what? You say that, but there was also like there was a dude in Brigade that was like Seahawk or something like that, and he had a hat like Wolverine.
Seahawk is Batman. It's the Batman helmet with 2 things coming down.
Yeah,
yeah. But in that, I think it might be that book where that Dreadnought dude is. It was bad guys. I digress. You know, you said some of this reminded you of Turtles. There are parts story-wise where it makes me think of The Crow, where you have the cops showing up, you have this guy fucking wreaking havoc upon the bad dudes who has no discernible kryptonite and, you know, gets off scot-free. We have the lady at the Bugle who's going to uncover the identity. This is where Jim Valentino's kind of showing his chops, because he's building in a bunch of stuff that he's going to be able to exploit in future issues if he chooses to do so. So we have the journalist who's going to be trying to figure out the identity of Shadowhawk.
Played by Pam Anderson in the movie, judging by the reference. There were also, go back one page, because I love this drawing of this policeman where you're doing like cool color stuff. And then this is another one where it's a pretty interesting, like drawing wise, you know, like this is the stuff going back through it that really pops to me of like, oh wow, interesting stuff that Valentino's trying here on the page.
Totally. And this one completely reminds me of like the Neil Adams, Mike Hinge collaborations in heavy metal. And I'm sure Valentino would have fucked with some of that stuff.
It's a great thing with the idea of, one, how do you do cop lights?
Yeah.
You know, because that's something that comes up in comics. And then like two, like let's play with the coloring that we're able to do now.
Now we have our baddie. So she's like, Faust comes to mind also, from the hyperbole of beating up the bad guys. And you know, she's in Faust.
Very true. That layout to me feels so 80s. Like that would have come right out of like, you know,
It's
Renegade or Eclipse or some one of these companies would have a layout like that.
Yeah, totally. It's like the pastelness of it. It's like the Panda Brothers Grendel comics.
And also, I think she only has one leg. Like judging by that drawing, where's the other leg?
Yeah, man. That's why she's so pissed off and wants to burn down buildings all day. And
by the way, everybody at home, I have the coupon in here. This is you know, probably 9.96.
Right. So our guy Arson, he hides in plain sight, and he dresses up as like a male stripper, who also is dressed up like a New York Fire Department fella. So he's coming to let the old lady know that you know, he did some good work on across the train tracks, burned down a couple buildings, and she's all wet about it.
But also not happy that he's coming out.
Right.
And her name's Vendetta.
Of course. If you're burning down all of your properties, dude, like that, what other name can you have? I feel like Valentino didn't do enough to license his Shadowhawk boomerangs, man. Like Frisbee was being played back then. Could have did something with that.
You ever try to throw a boomerang?
Yes.
Ever have any luck of having that thing even curve?
Yes. If you did it now with like what you know about physics, you would do it, no problem. Here's the rub. You draw too much, and your wrist, like the way you got to snap your wrist, our wrists are not built for it anymore.
I was going to say I'm probably breaking my shoulder or something if I try throwing one of those things now.
Yeah, it's all about the snap of the wrist, because there was a girl that was hanging around, like part of the art crew, and her pops has a toy factory in Charleroi. And I went to the toy factory with her, and he does like all the like Numley pegs and like the weird little peg thing that would be like the Bob Evans. Like that's the kind of toys he made. He made a wooden toy horse from a tree from Monticello, dude. And he made boomerangs, and he gave us a bunch of boomerangs, and fucking me and Nate went to the baseball field throwing them shits.
I used to have like, remember the nose?
Yeah.
I can make that thing go.
Yeah, that was the fat boy.
It.
That was the fat boy fucking drunk party boomerang.
Well, I was a little too young for that one, but it was easier to manipulate because you could bend it.
Ah, dick. Not bad glass shards. You know, you got some perspective on these. We're very critical of our glass break in here on Cartoonist Kayfabe, and you got to have overlap, and you have to have glass of different shapes and sizes, or else it's too uniform looking. I know that's a shadow underneath the guy's nose, but it really does look like Detective Adolf Hitler.
It does, the hair and stuff together.
A little greasy. And then that guy, if you just showed me that, I would think it was a John Byrne drawing of this fella right here. But I am not intimidated by that police officer. And also the gun stuff is pretty weak.
You don't think he's tracing photos, huh?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Straight from Chandler with that double lighting. So we have the cops who are on the hunt. This is a cool thing to build conflict into your story, because you have numerous people that have some incentive to discover who Shadowhawk is. And that, you know, these people are clearly, we have our reporter and our vendetta. So, you know, they have their own reasons.
I love this composition where Shadowhawk's crouching and really does blend in there. Pretty good for, you know, creature of the night kind of character.
Yeah. So much about his superhero artwork, though, like what he builds, it really does feel like submissions type stuff. It looks like it's very, very crude stuff. When he was doing his first comics with Dave Sim, you know, it really wasn't this kind of thing. This is stretching him in a way, but this is pretty fucking dope.
Yeah.
You know, when we see all these names, dude, you know what, dude? I think I know why these names are here. And I think they might have like did some layout drawings and stuff for like the hype stuff. I don't know that's really Valentino's major interest.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. That look, like, I can't not see it as those 80s kind of, indie companies. It really feels like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially whenever you're like surrounded by the Jim Lees and McFarlanes and these guys who are like defining the 90s.
Yeah.
It feels like this is a previous decade.
It does, because like when he tries to do it, and the best image for it is this arson, that looks like a Lightning Comics Bloodfire character. Like this is a page out of a Bloodfire Lightning comic.
This does look good though. I like this a lot.
Yeah, really hype. I bet you this is like you draw this page first. That foot's a little sus, as they say.
Foot is strange. Because you know what, man? We're looking at, I think, the soul, right?
Exactly.
So we got metal soles. The next panel, whenever he tries to land somewhere, it's not going to go well. You need some rubber on those soles.
Curiously, two
interesting
signatures.
What's up with that?
Really close together.
Do you think he's mashing up artwork? That is bizarre.
Yeah.
Like
it's not even on two sheets.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, I forgot I already signed this one. 1 inch from where I'm going to sign it again.
Yeah, we'll ask him about that in our next shoot with Jim Valentino.
That's peculiar.
Of which we do have a shoot interview with Jim Valentino, so make sure you check that out. Getting some Stevenson characters over. Richard Horry with Trevor Scott?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. This was one that Valentino was always pushing about as long as I heard him talk image. This was one of them. And Eric Stevenson, a color there.
And this exactly like Bloodfire Lightning comic kind of set of characters.
Yeah, it's interesting, his style on superheroes. Not the norm. Man, look at that brigade. Pitt looks pretty cool there. Very gritty.
But you know, like when you unpack it and you try to look at it without the color in your mind, it looks like Del Keown going back to his Air Cell days. You know, and like it's got that rawness to it.
Yeah, I like his rawness. As he gets more polished or works with like a polished inker,
yeah,
I get mad at it.
Yeah, agreed.
And look at that one, the cursed book.
Yeah, in '92.
Dude, even those ads, like you can see, I bet you that's a Malibu in-house putting together the type on the ad.
Right.
Because that feels so much like the Malibu. Again, like that 80, what I think of as like 80s, I guess it's early 90s, but I love this too. This was an image that I guess he would release, like I'd see it in press and stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved it in black and white and everything looked cool.
Yeah, for sure. Like seeing their work in black and white, it lets you know like what the art really is, you know, like what's really going on, because so many bells and whistles. Another thing I always think about with Whilce Portacio, kind of one of the aesthetic benefits of pushing off Wetworks really was the acceleration of the computer coloring technology. Kind of got to a better place for a comic where everybody has metal bodies, because like this yellow is basic.
Yeah, and people watching at home, we have a video on Wetworks 1 where we pull out the preview of Wetworks from 2 years before Wetworks 1 comes out, and you can see that color comparison very clearly right next to each other.
Yes. And then we have ad for Wizard and the editorial that Jim Valentino puts together to introduce us to the Shadowhawk series.
Yeah, and he's doing a contest of guess who Shadowhawk's identity is, and cite your clues. And he said there's not enough in issue 1 to have that guess.
Not even close, as in 0. But there it is, dude. Kayfabers, Jimmy and I could have swore we did a Shadowhawk episode before, but we can't find it. And if you guys know where it is, because we have some very, very studious Kayfabers out there who've been with us from day one, my best guess is that maybe it was packed within a Wizard episode, because we would do that early on. We'd have 2-hour episodes, and maybe we looked at Shadowhawk that way, because I remember the arsonist guy. And the only reason I would have read this comic in the past 5 years would be for Cartoonist Kayfabe. And I remember talking to you about it. Can't find that episode. So we're clearing things up here today. Good to go, Jimmy?
Yes.
Get those Dragon Ball comics.
Yeah, do the Kings remember us doing Shadowhawk? It's so weird. I have a vivid memory of going through it page by page, and both of us looked for that book and could not find it.
Look at this thing, guys. Isn't that just like so excessive? There are 4 or 5 of these for one piece. 90 books.
That's
And by the way,
amazing. Wonder how many of those units they sell. You know, like the big set.
yeah.
Jeez.
I have this one and I have Bakuman. So Jimmy, I was like just looking at these randomly myself, and there's no graphic design to them. They're not appropriating like the title pages from the earlier, from the chapters or anything like this. It's just these like very matter of fact images, and like that's kind of the conversation that we'll have is like we could talk about the system that's in place for making manga, and then that crunch period of having to make the tankobon, and then can keep the series going. So I'm gonna pull in pretty tight. Cartoonist Kayfabe is partially brought to you by the Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon have access to all of our videos before anybody else. They're also hanging out with us in a live stream recording chat session as we record these videos, so they get to see everything that we're talking about very, very early, and get the cheapest copies of the books and things that we're talking about before anybody else has that opportunity. We have 1,500 plus videos in our filmography as we speak. Several of those videos are about the great Akira Toriyama, including the first chapters of Dragon Ball, some of his other singular works. Sandland is another book that we talked about. So check out those videos. But furthermore, because we have 1,500 videos, we might have talked about your favorite comics. So hit the search feature on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel, search for your favorite titles, and check those videos out. Jimmy and I are going to be at Big Apple Con December 16th, 2023. And without further ado, Jimmy, let's do our little cover overview, Dragon Ball Z cover to cover. Now, when this book was first released in Japan, it's just Dragon Ball. 42 volumes of the series called Dragon Ball. But there are 2 very distinct periods of Dragon Ball comics, and what do we learn about the American comic industry, man? They're like kids like number ones. So when it has its pivot point, they call it Dragon Ball Z, and I think there's bigger implications, like because I'm sure TV usurps Viz Comics. So there were 2 shows in America. There was the Dragon Ball Z stuff, and then there was Dragon Ball. So what I wanted to do here, I got my hands on all of the tankobon of Dragon Ball Z, let's just check out these covers, chat them up, and have a conversation about the sort of workflow of the mangaka, because Akira Toriyama, very famous for not having many assistants. He had 2 or 3 assistants, and every 2 months or so, 2.5 months, a new tankobon is coming out, but the series doesn't stop. The 17 pages that show up in Shonen Jump never go away. You know, every month he's doing about 60 to 70 pages of comics. So he has to do these covers while putting together the comic. And as you could see, there, and this goes for most tankobon out there in Japan, the graphic design is slapped together in a lot of ways. You know, it's just draw some kind of cool image, and it's not about the bells and whistles.
Do you think that he's like, it goes through an editorial process the way that we see like the actual manga go through?
I think that it's much speedier, and from what I know and understand, the mangaka that I talk to, when it's tankobon time, you have a sort of blank slate of opportunity. You can redraw pages, you could add pages, you could do whatever you want, but you have 2 weeks, a very, very finite, short amount of time. And I don't think that this thing is an institution, and most tankobon are. So the cover isn't going to make or break these series.
Right. That makes total sense to me, and I can kind of see that clearly with these. You're not going to suddenly get a new reader because Volume 5 has a cover that people go, oh, let me jump on board here.
Yeah.
But there's still some kind of consideration, I would think. Yeah. I don't know. It's neat to see his art like this because they're very nice illustrations, all of them so far.
Yeah.
But from a sales standpoint, I have no idea, like, what's the value here?
Totally. I believe that the color is probably more often than not Copic markers. Really clearly see, he does a kind of cel-shaded thing, but you could see the bleed of the paper, and you could see the edges of the markers sometimes when he's doing his cel-shaded stuff. Known for his vehicles and having like kawaii vehicles. You know, he's able to stretch them up and make them real kind of cute and round and curvy.
And I'm assuming these like 21, 22, I'm sure the one in your hand is 23, that this is like the overall series numbering, you know, combining Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z together.
Could be. Yeah, it's like 16 or 17 or maybe 18 of the first round. And it becomes like such a, when it's Dragon Ball Z, it's such a pivot point for the series. And you know, I'm really interested in this idea of compulsive comic making because I'm working on that daily strip right now, that Switchblade Shorties thing. And you got to get a strip done a day. And he's got to do a 17-page comic every week. And the conceit of Dragon Ball at the beginning is like, okay, there are these 7 Dragon Balls, and you have to get them all together, and then you could like ask for a wish or whatever. So that gives you a lot of storytelling possibility. But after you get the Dragon Balls a couple of times, like you can't keep going back to the well. So he drastically changes things, and Goku is really an alien, and he's a Saiyan warrior, and then, you know, the other Saiyans are coming to like hunt him down. It's completely different from, you know, the karate tournaments of the OG. Look at that great stuff, man.
I'm loving like watching the marker color, where, you know, it's orange, it's a yellow, it's this pale yellow. They're so distinct.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, one of the joys of this is seeing a guy who just draws like a machine and then seeing him do a bunch of drawings.
Could we infer that Mr. Toriyama had like no time when he puts this piece together and then has maybe a little bit more time with this one?
I don't know. I don't know if that's what to take away or if it's like an idea, because it's not like, I think this is a striking image. In fact, if you gave me both of those and said we're going to sell one book, what cover to use, I'd probably go use this cover, because then you can identify it at postage stamp size. You get your main character looks cool.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about it from that point of view. I'm talking about from like just pure pencil mileage. This one takes less time to draw than this one, with the vehicle and the perspective and stuff. You know, draw 4 guys that you draw all the time.
But I mean, how much less time with this guy? You know what I mean? Is one of these an hour and one an hour and a half?
Yeah, that is the wild thing. And man, when you watch Man Ben and you see these guys doing the work, it doesn't look like they draw any faster than you or I.
It's true.
You know, it's just like 4 hours sleep a night.
Don't see him erasing much. I also marvel at the color work that a lot of these manga do, considering it's not really something they seem to specialize in.
Right.
You know, like I can't imagine him doing color studies for this illustration, but I really like that green in the background on there. So I don't know. Is it just innate? Is it honed over the years of drawing, 80 hours a week? I don't know.
And they'll try things, like leaving the white negative space out there. You see a very faint pink there. It makes me wonder what the original looked like. Doing some work and scanning in my my marker, it's not one for one. And what you look at on the paper is not what the printed page
Yeah, no doubt.
looks like necessarily. And these are all fresh illustrations. They are not like the title pages of the chapters from within or anything. It's completely fresh drawings.
Those are great comparisons of what you're saying, because look how different those two are. Completely different.
Yeah, man.
I really love seeing that space used this way. And you know what is nice about this? It's the same pretty much on every one of these covers. So you get that exercise in every single art school ever is do 100 drawings at this, in these squares.
Right.
And that's what you kind of get to see a master doing here.
Isn't he just a master, just like that clear line with these vehicles and stuff?
They're so good.
It's so perfect.
They look so three-dimensional.
They
like
do.
all the vehicles that he draws. I might like them more than the figures.
This was the thing. Like whenever, I don't know about you, man, but I took that little tour in 10th grade to go to Votech and see what that's about. I want to draw comics, so can I manipulate this shit into my universe? And there were the kids who were like the industrial designers who were doing like their card designs with the Copic markers. And it's the first time I saw Copic markers, probably Prismacolors. But doing this kind of thing with the highlights and all that.
Now that you say that, I remember vividly of like Art Institute touring that, because it was almost like one of the commercial illustration applications for that kind of art was cars, bikes, that kind of thing, like high-end, products that you were doing renderings of. And it was like that with markers, with the highlights. It was almost like, how realistic can you make this car look? And it totally feels like this. Like he's drawing the cars like you might a character, but in terms of rendering, it's like, man, I saw this kind of stuff,
Totally.
Going through those schools.
Isn't it a wild choice? Like you would never think to draw the back part of something like that. And I bet it's a tougher drawing. And I wonder if that's what he's getting into. Like, this is so much tougher of a drawing and you guys will appreciate that. Because like there are times where that's in my mind where it's like, oh man, it's the thing that happens when you post stuff on Instagram and it's a piece that you really toil away at and you get, 500 likes. And then you do something that's kind of like more dashed out, but clearly people respond to it much more. Because it's like, it's very curious. You would never think to do that. And I don't think that one editor would ever say, yeah, this is what you do for this one. Keeping the number motif, by the way.
Yes. And again, a complete different approach to this cover than this one.
Right. And some of it looks wet, like we might be getting into a watercolor background.
Yeah, definitely could be.
See, if you're doing cars, like, is this not the angle that you use? Manipulating the square in a different way too, by giving yourself two images to play with.
Love it. Once again, man, you do 50 of these. That's what you start to do then.
I love the marker treatment on that alien.
I love that alien. Yeah. All those black dots and stuff on his skin, perfect, fantastic.
Straight from Al Williamson. But then Toriyama, it's like, okay, man, you get your like little Deuce Coupe or whatever the fuck. But now we're going to invent some vehicles. And it has that like isometric, it has the Dragon Quest world map type background, that clear line. This guy, like, he really evangelizes me with that clear line. Because like, when you think clear line, you think Hergé and that European stuff, Juiced Swart and shit. But those guys never draw like hyperbolic fighting and like action stuff. It's pretty tepid. But he has the clear line and gives you a bombast.
It's fascinating too. Like this could have just red, just a flat background color.
Yeah.
But now let's draw that aerial shot. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And the other thing that you can't sleep on when it's the what do you call it, like the complete 42 volumes, is there's a tapestry of images that goes across the entire 42, and it started from volume 1. So he's planning that drawing out and working on it over a decade. That's pretty wild.
That's very fun.
Yeah.
That's one I wouldn't be surprised if the publisher has some idea on, you know, like, hey man, do like one drawing.
Right.
We'll wrap that around the spine.
Yeah, because like when I went to visit Shueisha, the publisher of Shonen Jump and the publisher of these tankobon, they believe in their big hits. They really, really do. Like the editor-in-chief sat me down and we were going through the magazine, and he was talking about the philosophy of like where they place things within the magazine. And you know, the front page, the very first strip, you'll try something new out, or maybe you know, it's like One Piece gets that. The further back you get, the closer to cancellation you get. And he looked at me and he said, Oda's One Piece will never be in the back. It'll never be in the back. So Dragon Ball, I mean, that was, Shueisha believed in that. It was a huge hit. So you can bet that it's not going to get canceled before you finish your big tapestry or something. See, now something that simple, it's a thicker line. It looks like it might have even been drawn smaller and blown up. I think that there's tales here. And there will be times at like the chapter breaks. Well, I guess it would be in like the regular issues, on the table of contents. It would have their names and stuff, and then like a little sentence. And sometimes his sentences would be like, "I got the flu. Oh no," that type of thing. And that could be that sort of thing, because we could agree that this and this.
Yes,
you know, if there was any doubt about the speed of a drawing, I think that this is a good example.
But you know what? I look at this and I think, did he have a different drawing? And the editor went, you know what? Don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, here's just an iconic, quick.
That
did this while you're telling me you don't like the other one. Here's a replacement.
There's a big point to that, man, because the editor is a contributor nearly as much as the creatives involved. Like the editor's job is literally to do that. It's a substantive position, unlike a lot of our system where it's copy editing, you know, making sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. You have to impress these editors. And when we talk manga and we know the schedule and how Toriyama has to do 17 pages every week, that is not 7 days of drawing. Very often now, I bet that they use the word rookie out there very regularly, and it's like rookie cartoonists. That is not what Toriyama was. He already had a very popular series before this, completely trusted by Shueisha. So I bet when he turned in his name to the editor, I bet it got approved pretty quick, or there might be a little back and forth and he gets to go off and get busy. But there could be 3 days of that 7-day week spent on just nailing down the story and what's going on on each page. It could be that much time, to which you have 4 days to draw the comic. And when you get down to that crunch time, that's that period of time when the editor is kicking it at your house and he's chilling, watching TV. And the second you put the final fucking pen marks down, he's taking it, he's hopping on a train or catching a cab, taking it to the plant to go get printed. They're very, very, very involved. And we have a shoot interview with Felipe Smith, who had a series called Pipachu in Morning Magazine from Kodansha. And he tells a story about how, you know, sometimes the editor will call him up at 3 a.m. and solve a storytelling problem. And that would require Felipe to redraw a sequence. And he would be sad about that and like, oh, fuck, I haven't been sleeping for days. But then he realizes that like the editor's doing the same work. So it's like you can't, you guys are all really, really going for it. You know, a big thing that would happen too with these covers is it's Toriyama drawing what he wants. And I can bet you that we could go through every page of this volume and you ain't getting a cool blue dragon.
That's a beautiful drawing.
Yeah. Still going back to that Dragon Quest stuff, because that's the other thing, people, as he's doing these Dragon Ball games, I mean, the Dragon Ball comics and stuff, he's got overseeing the animation. he's designing characters for video games. Like the Dragon Quest series is much beloved. Like it got to the point where Dragon Quest games had to be released on Friday because kids were calling off from school when it was released like midweek or early in the week. Like these are institutions.
You know, looking at these two, I also wonder, like, was he ahead of the deadline on this one?
Right.
Because this looks like a joyful sort of like, oh, this is something I want to draw. Look at the, you know, like there's a care to the detail in this that to me says leisure.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the other covers that look like, hey man, it's due. We're ready to go to print.
I think that like
all speculation on my part, but it does feel like if you look at, you know, you look at 30 of these drawings, you can sense that it's like you're in different places on some of these.
Yeah. Just thinking about all this stuff, man, working on Hip Hop Family Tree, there, in the smallest way I can relate to the crunch, the deadline crunch and stuff. Cause like it was just 4 volumes. So it was 4 years of which, you know, he probably got 3 of these things out in the time it took me to get one out. But it was a weekly strip, 2 pages a week, every Tuesday on a website. And then after about 40 weeks of that, I would read what I have and then try to like shore it up in like the last 10 weeks or 12 weeks of that year to try to figure out what the arc is. I would just build the strip without having any arc in mind. But I would read 40 weeks worth, 80 pages, I could see like, okay, this is this era. I'm going to focus the last 5 strips or the last 10 strips on this idea to kind of tie it up and create an arc. And then the strips would take me 7 days a week. I was always down to crunch time, turning my shit in on Monday night because it was never planned. It just happened that like, oh fuck, this is super viral. Let me keep this going every week. I had no buffer. And then I got to the point where books are going to be happening. And there's a lot of extra drawing. I'm hand lettering the indexes and indicias and drawing covers and back matter and doing all kinds of extra stuff. The strip takes me 7 days a week. Now I have about 10 other pages I got to draw, plus turn these things into suitable print files and copy edit. Where do I fit that time in? And it literally was you sleep less. You just sleep less for 4.5 years. Love it, man.
That's a fun breakup of our Squarespace.
And it feels real sensible, right? Like play the hits. Like, you know, you're winding things down. It's a much thicker volume than all the other volumes that we looked at. So I think it's getting to be, you know, it's getting to be time. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel. So play the hits. Get all the big guys in there on one cover. And then this is our finale, the volume number 42.
It's pretty cool too, the variety of personality in these characters for being like, because again, if you said draw 9 characters, each in these little squares, it'd be very easy to just be like straight on.
Right.
But there's so much like low shots, side shots, looking down, attitude, personality expressed in these characters that are really only part of a head.
Right. And it's so good. It's like a smug arrogance. To me, that's like strong confidence that he's going to fuck you up. Like he knows he's going to fuck you up. This guy try not to look too nervous, but he's going to be a problem, but not sure if he could beat up who he's going to beat up. I don't know about that face, man. A little stoic.
Yeah, stoic's the right word.
Hamburger. John Holmes.
Maybe a little too confident.
Yeah, like ready to do his day's work. This is a Chihuahua syndrome. Has a bark bigger than his bite.
Napoleon complex.
Exactly. This guy's pre-climax, about to bust that load. And then he's like, what they say about the Jizza and that Wu-Tang album, man. Like, he's watching you play yourself so that he can call you on it.
I see so much Hewlett in this stuff, and I wonder if it's just coincidence or if it is a situation of these guys looking at each other. Yeah,
that's a good point. I don't know that they look at each other, but I think they looked at the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is animation, like cartoon stuff.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that the similarities are also bolstered by the marker usage.
Absolutely. But you know, the how much they communicate in their gestures and expressions.
Yeah.
When we do these videos, like, it's always to me like, what can I apply?
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that I feel like everybody watching at home, regardless of your level, if you're trying to make drawings of characters, that's something you can take.
Mm-hmm.
Make those characters all say something every drawing.
And I just can't stop talking about the clear line aspect. He knows the volume of the forms, and the drapery works. Everything feels built really well on the cylinders, and just a master artist. He's a guy that comes up in conversation when I talk with Jeff Darrow fairly often. Jeff puts him up on the Mount Rushmore, up there with Mobius and Otomo and, you know, Kirby and like that. And I do too. And the Dragon Ball comics are the most popular. As an exercise in compulsive comic making and just getting one piece done after the other, it is a heck of a ride. We started out this year, I believe. You know, when I came back from Tokyo the last time, I got the Art of Wall exhibit book with the big Otomo interview that we unpacked. And Otomo was talking about how, like, these kind of comics, it's not a story. There's a formula to it. And that's where I got that idea of like compulsive comic making, because this is an option. This is an option. You know, you could do this and make very, very cool comics. And it's an option that I'm very interested in exploring at this point in my life right now. It is not, you know, a finite set of books to tell a complete middle and, you know, beginning, middle, and end with definite trajectories and stuff. That would be Akira. That's an option also. And as enterprising comic makers, like young comic makers, people who are going to school, you hang on the expertise of your instructor so much that you just can feel like they're right, but then it's contradictory to like maybe your next instructor at some other class, and it can make you spin in circles and get very kind of confused. At the end of the day, there's no correct answer. One is not more beneficial or sound than the other. It's kind of like pick something and bust your fucking ass, and with some luck and with some eyeballs, you might have a hit on your hands. But there's no one way to do things. And Toriyama, just as valid a creator as Katsuhiro Otomo, and people dismiss Dragon Ball. It really got played out, you know, when we were like in the 90s and stuff. If Julio's Day is the comic that I have given out the most, Dragon Ball comics are the second, because like all my buds growing up who would have like the silk fucking shirts with the wraparound images, you know, their Kennywood outfits, I would hook them up with these Dragon Ball comics. Like, yeah, that anime is kind of whack, dude. Like, why don't you read one of these? Good to go, Jim?
I am.
That's exactly what I wanted, Jimmy, to have kind of more of a conversation. I think I'm good, Jimmy, for to shoot the intro or like the commercial, and then I'll put it up to you. Thank you, sir. I saw online that dude Michael Keegan Key or whatever his name is from Key and Peele. He was hosting SNL, and this is when the Michael Jordan Last Dance was coming out. So he's Jordan, and it's the Pitch and Pennies thing with his, like, he had that real weird security guard who's like a real old man with like a white mullet and stuff. And it's the scene in The Last Dance where they're doing pitch and pennies and betting, you know. And in the actual documentary, like, the security guard would win, and the way that they juxtaposed it was like that's going on, and in the actual documentary, the what do you call it? The security guard, he goes like that, And so they play it all straight to that point, and then it becomes that Jordan thing from the games where he's like, and then when he did that shrug, man, like I took it personally. Like it did that whole bit. It's so good, man. He did that shrug and I took it personally, and like that part of the documentary where these guys are coming out with their press statements and all of that kind of shit. Like they put it onto that.
That's funny.
And then it became like, let's bet $1,000 and like really like destroy this guy's life and make him destitute and broke and really fuck him up. It was good stuff. I think my books are in the other room. You know, something that I have been thinking about too, that I really got to get on the ball with, is I want to do some promo images for my strip that are like full color marker drawings with the girls in the costumes and all that kind of stuff. So like that's on my mind because like I'm just not going to be drawing strips really. Like I hope to. They have these things out there called work cafes where you call ahead or you reserve a spot and you could just chill out, not in your room. We're going to do a lot of that out there, and I plan on like doing roughs and designing strips and stuff. But like I need to design some of that shit because like the days leading up to January 1st, I want to have some real cool images. Like, you know, this first appearance, I don't know if Jeff sent you this, but he recently bought the Shonen Jump with the first appearance of Sandland, and it's them on like the golf cart coming front view, and they're all like kind of holding on. Like I want to do an image like that of that Fisher Price Crazy Coupe with the red and yellow, like kind of coming forward with like the girls kind of hanging on it, looking badass with their helmets on and stuff, and do like a marker illustration and just like a nice square that could fit on Instagram. And I have a couple other ideas that the days leading up to January 1st, I just want, 5, 4, like that type of thing, and try to, but like I got to have that time to do it because these strips, man, I'm putting in a lot of effort. I started after reading that Gilbert stuff and how he uses gray as just like I've been doing that, like places where I think I would use a zipatone to like, just like, fuck it, just do the hatching. But like, that's time, you know? Cause I've been looking at Griffith as well. And you know, he doesn't take those shorts either. Like his shit is all practical. I'll have to push back a lot. So don't lock nothing.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, I know, right?
Dave, I don't need an epoxy one.
Yeah, me neither. I got mine for $25, dude, at one of the New Dimension sales. All right, I got these locked in.
Yeah, I probably got mine at Copacetic. He was big on John Pham and had a bunch of that stuff.
Yeah.
He bought bulk.
Right, yeah, because like that was the thing. Like at the SPX from our era, is it was like these like strangers, like these cartoonists that like aren't us. It was like they looked at Bill as like a John or something like that. Where like because he's got the little half box that he's walking around with, and they're just like waiting for Bill to come up to their table to see if he's going to buy 5 of their thing. It's a very desperate.
I would always do the thing because that was back like the early SPXs would be Comics Journal message board.
Yeah.
And everybody would post like what they would get. And like I'm working the show. I'm at my table. I'm not getting anything. Mm-hmm. And I would come back and I would see the thread and then I'd go to Copacetic and like go through the box and pull out everything that I wish I would have got at the show.
Yeah. I was very thankful.
It was a nice luxury. You ready?
Yes, sir. The videos are brought to you by the books that we make, and 2023 was and is a big year. 2024 is going to be just the same. The Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is out there. About 75% of this print run has been accounted for, so you guys have about 25% left of our stock to go. Scoop up that book if you see it. It's going to make an excellent gift. The X-Men Grand Design trilogy comes out November 14th. It collects all of my X-Men Grand Design works inside of one nice, handy soft cover. Scoop that up. There are 3 volumes of Red Room that are completed. 2 of them are out on the stands right now. The end trigger warnings. But coming to you in early 2024 is Red Room Crypto Killers with dozens of pages of extra features and commentary in the back. Street Angel, Princess of Poverty is coming to you at the end of November. It is a companion piece to Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive. You get both of these books. You have all of Jimmy's Street Angel comics to date. He's been self-publishing, and here you have True Crime Funnies, the Black and White zine, 1986 zine. Go to Jimmy's website. He might be sold out right at the moment, but you never know. He might have fresh stock depending on when you're watching this video. And Hulk Grand Design is Jimmy's contribution to the Grand Design mythology that we have created for Marvel Comics. Now that we're done paying the bills, let's get back to the video. I'm going to make another tea real quick. Our lapel mics, Jimmy, we got to remember to put them on the other side of our snouts.
Yep.
If the mic is picking up some crazy sound, it's because I'm squeezing honey into my little cup. It's a wild comic right there.
It's something.
Denny O'Neil, man, so much of his work is really, I feel like it's like punching above his weight class with what he's trying to accomplish and stuff. And it comes off, it's very mean to say, but his skill level is not proportional with what he wants to be doing and talking about. And I think his like little screed on art or whatever that comic is a fine example of what I'm saying.
Yeah, it
doesn't work. And it's the hyperbole of Frank Miller's images also juxtaposed with that. It's laughable in its pretension.
Pretentious is the word for it.
Can't sleep on that Joe Juiceco cover. This is Bizarre Adventures number 31 that we're going to be looking at here today. The violence issue. Hit us up and let me know who you guys have in mind for us, maybe future shoot interviews and stuff. Because I want to really hit the ground running with that when we get back. I really want that James O'Barr. I think James O'Barr is going to be a winter guy that we need to get, Jimmy.
Okay.
I when the con circuit's going on, he is traveling the fucking universe. So he's a dude that I really want. All right, let me go pour some water in that bitch now.
Ken, thanks for picking up the True Crime Funnies, man. I appreciate it. Glad that worked for you. We could probably get Becky Clunan on. She's friendly. She made us a weekly art piece back in the day. Jeez, that might have been before COVID. But Becky was, my first job at DC was inking Becky on American Virgin.
You know what? She, here's the thing, man, because the fucking internet is punk shit, and people anonymously talk shit. So many of the girls, like Becky included, and like I'll never say this like out on the weekly, but these girls don't want to do this shit because of bad commenters. Like this is a very sensitive group of people. Like making comics, you're emotional, you're inside your thoughts, you're sensitive, and they don't want to hear about their looks. Unfortunately, the audience is not to be trusted, and it's affected the girls that I'm interested in talking to on the channel.
Yeah.
So we reach out, but they all almost unanimously are like, they could ruin their day with the wrong fucking comment. And we're good about keeping our eyes on that, but they just don't want the headache.
Hey man, did you ever meet Ted McKeever?
No.
Me either.
I've seen him at shows. He was at that, I think that Houston show where I was next to Liefeld and Herb Trimpe. I think he had a setup there, but I mean, he's selling old wampum,
I don't know
his like weird Jesus comic that he did, like that was like an odd size like brown paper
I just saw that somewhere.
Image comic,
and it is the worst size.
Yeah, it's
like a little bigger than a comic, but not a magazine size. Like
and
where
small.
I saw it, it was wedged in.
Yeah.
He was such a big dude for me. Like when I started ordering from Advanced Comics, one of the first things I ordered was that Metropole Graffiti Design Edition. Beautiful book, but like, I don't know, it was almost like this weird impulse order for a big expensive hardcover. But I still keep that in my room. Like it was such a holy shit. Like I never saw anything like it. It kind of fits into that Detroit scene. Like if that had been a Caliber guy, it would have made perfect sense. Like if he had space next to Guy Davis and Vince Locke and
I
even O'Barr to some extent, with so much texture.
Yeah, with stuff like Metropole and shit. I think of him as that.
Yeah.
Because like Metropole might as well have been a Caliber comic.
Yeah. I remember an interview with him because he did like two volumes of it, like a 3-issue miniseries and then like the main series. And he made this production about how the editor, he either had to have sound effects or couldn't have sound effects in one of them. Whatever it was like this, like to me, it was the weirdest thing ever to dwell on either way.
Right. You want to
make sense.
Get your monitor up.
Close that because that might.
Yeah, close it fully out. I realize like I'm still impressed with high internet speeds now. I was posting some stuff like some of the Time Magazine video and shit on Hip Hop Family Tree, and I got it saved in my drive. It's a 600 megabyte file. It downloads in like 3 seconds, and I'm just it's like blows my mind, man, because I'm still from that like 63. What was it? 56K.
Yeah.
56K.
I cannot believe how unpleasant this is.
Yep. I do think it really has to do with our stream.
Oh, you know what?
And then watch it do its thing so that it goes correct. That doesn't feel right.
No, it's right on my phone.
It is. You want to test it? You want to try?
Not really.
And then your thing fully went away. The one thing that I think that would be possible, Jimmy.
I don't even know how to fix that. Like it's square on my phone.
Yeah, I mean, just take it off and hold it and see if that does anything. Yeah, Yeah, I think that was important. But the one thing I could think, Jimmy, is to get a Cat 5 cable or like, Ethernet cable and directly hardwire into the computer to the thing. So we'd have to get like a long one, like a 25-footer or 50-footer, so that we got the direct pipeline there, and that maybe alleviates some Wi-Fi. It's the only thing I could think.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? Because the reason we moved that stuff in there was so that the stream would be
I
good.
didn't realize that was still running on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's not hardwired, and the wire I have in there is not long enough. We need a longer wire.
That's probably worth a try.
Yeah,
because this surprises me.
Yeah.
I think if this were always the case, like you wouldn't be able to, like we wouldn't use it. Like if this had always been the way it worked, it would be a different story.
Good to go?
Yeah. Cartoonist Kayfabe is a daily comic book YouTube channel. We have 1,500 videos in our archives, and you can search through those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Click on the little magnifying glass icon, enter your favorite book or favorite creator, and chances are you might find a video of us talking about it. We are also partially brought to you by the Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. There are 3 different levels that will get you access to our videos ahead of time, and at the King Kayfaber level, you'll get access to all of our videos first, which will give you a leg up on the Kayfabe effect. Sometimes whenever we cover an old comic, it can be hard to find, it can disappear, it can go up in price. You want to be the first ones looking for that. And finally, our next appearance as Cartoonist Kayfabe will be at Big AppleCon in New York City on December 16th. First time showing in New York City for me, Ed, since before COVID. So I'm excited to check that out. If you're in the tri-state area, put that on your calendar, come out and say hello to us in person. All right, so today we are going to take a look at Bizarre Adventures, the Hard Look at Violence issue. This is from 1981. Starts out strong. Joe Jusko on the cover there. Pretty eye-catching image, I think. A woman with her overcoat open, exposing all kinds of guns, grenades, bullets.
Sex, violence.
Everything you want there as a kid, right? As an 11-year-old.
Straight Sybil Danning looking chick.
And this has to be pretty early. I don't know when Joe Jusko starts getting published, but 81's pretty early.
That's what I was thinking, man. He's still the police or something, man. And even the painting, like it's awesome, but you could tell like this face compared to like what he goes on to do like 10 years later, it's way different. He recently hit a milestone. That's he's the only guy to have painted covers for every Tarzan novel that Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote. He's the only guy to do that. So I think that's a pretty noteworthy accomplishment. And I've been listening to those audiobooks. Pretty fun stuff. It's good company.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Making comics.
Yeah, Jusko, got to know him a tiny bit, used to live in Pittsburgh for a little while and would participate with other comics professionals and was always a nice guy to me. But like his paintings, and I like watching them online because he'll show them in stages. And it's so bizarre to me the way he paints, where like things are masked off, like a whole figure. And it'll be like a complete background and the figure's just white.
Yeah.
It's so different. All right, so April 1982. Thought it was 81, but 1982. So early 80s, and we're already starting this idea of let's have a theme. Let's look at these as violence. But meanwhile, this is the black and white part of the Marvel magazine publishing output, and apparently they do not sell well.
And this all reads like a trifle. Like you come in for the names. You got Frank Miller. There's a Frank Miller story I never read. You got Sienkiewicz, and it's like no Adams era Sienkiewicz. Larry Hama on the 1s and 2s, which is like a rare morsel to me. It's awesome. And
John Byrne has a couple of pages in here. Herb Trimpe inking himself. Steve Bissette has a big page.
Yeah,
big story
that's so good.
Here.
Yeah, with that, what's his homeboy?
Steve
Perry, man. That's that dude that got chopped up to bits. Big willies, man. But it feels like almost to a man in here that it's just a trifle to get some pages done and make some money. Like there's no stakes to anything. It's all a jerk off. And I don't know about you, but as a kid, when those anthologies would be coming around, SPX, that type of shit, when it's like the themed anthology, or we'll take it to like a lower level when you're doing like commissions, right? And there's like the themed sketchbooks. You telling me what to draw, or even giving me guidance at that level, makes me less enthused than just letting me do my thing.
Yeah, I have a few bizarre heroes. There's some interesting stuff scattered throughout the run. Like Simonson does his Lawnmower Man in one of them, which is pretty cool. Miller does a few different pieces throughout, and he seems to experiment.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like this is Miller stretching, growing, trying some stuff. This story may not be the best example, although there's some of it. And you'd see it on like Spider-Girl cover where he puts in like the monsters as posters, the movie monsters as a background element. And I kind of feel that way with some of this, like these clipped engravings that are in the backgrounds of some of this story. But just seeing him with the duo shade and stuff, there's some interesting stuff in the other Miller stories that I've seen him do in Bizarre Adventures. I don't think everybody does it. And some of these are so throwaway as like,
Totally.
I didn't even, it's like 2-page filler. It feels like something that comes out of the bullpen sometimes.
Can't ignore that this first time he's using like the Sin City type treatment. You can't ignore that piece. But I think, and you pointed to this exactly as you were talking about this part, but you see that lettering, that's Eisner-ish lettering. And I think that Eisner is deep in his mind with the compositions here. It feels like the stuff that Eisner was doing around this period of time when he starts building up his own graphic novel bibliography, allowing for these negative space moments and stuff. And this is something that, this is a motif, this negative space stuff, that Miller's going to be bringing to the Wolverine miniseries. Every single page has a big wide open field of space.
Yeah, good call. How about this for even like not hard panel borders on these?
Right.
It's kind of neat. Definitely playing with that design and page layout thing.
The big arts, that's another thing that is very indicative of like the Will Eisner Spirit comics, where, you know, there would be MacGuffins on these 7-page stories, and sometimes it would be something as simple as the word art being, you know, bold. What we're looking at here is like a very weird, is like a black market art dealer, and they're getting rid of like some old stuff, and the art is so strong that it's meaningful. But the art, of course, I have no problem with it, but it really is for the subject of the story. It's like that Ghost World, the boy who just wants to draw dudes with hammers type meaning levels, you know, for something that's trying to be much more thought out and philosophical. But you have dudes with straight up ninja swords, ninja stars, and decapitations where this is concerned.
Let me read a little bit so the people at home, lest they think we're being too hard on Mr. O'Neill. But art is wily. Art is persistent. Art can be seductive as well as fierce. If you cannot be wounded one way, trust art to find another, to beckon you to pleasure only to strike. That's tough stuff. I don't know if this ever would have connected with me at any age so far. Maybe as I get older. But again, interesting art, and you know, Miller is kind of active at this time. Like he's I don't know if he's still doing. I think he's still maybe doing Daredevil at this point. As you said, the Wolverine miniseries is probably right around this time period. And there are other Bizarre Adventures where he's contributing to. So, you know, I feel like that's a guy who, like, you can see the hunger in Miller for just drawing, for really trying to make pages.
Here's the palette: white, black, one tone of gray, darker gray, black. So you have the little monographic rainbow. That's a Sin City image.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here's your Larry Hama. And Ralph Reese is also in these credits, so I don't know if he's helping or maybe they're sharing studio space at this point, something like that. But this story to me was really impressive going through, like, art-wise, pretty amazing stuff that's on display here.
Absolutely. Like, when I was going through it to start, I was like, oh shit, is this Rick Veitch? And no, it's Larry Hama. It's very rare that we get Hama. The lettering, a part of that made me think of the Veitch stuff, but certainly this stuff, you know, the Big Daddy Roth, like, Ninja Turtles issue. This was a pleasure to read. It goes nowhere and it's meaningless in terms of story, but a lot of cool characters. He always, like, has his copyrights in there too. Like, that's something that you don't see on any of the other guys. Wild characters, cool designs. It feels like an underground comic. You know, it feels directly like just something that would be akin to...
This is somewhere in here they give the story of this, right? So they basically told everybody, they just said violence is our theme, right? Any kind of story, any kind of violence. What he was hoping for and what he got was reaction to the fact that violence in one form or another pervades our news, our media, our very culture. So this prompt here is violence for pretty much every story in here, but what a strange way everyone approaches it. This is almost like a B movie kind of horror movie. Thinking of that, there was The Hills Have Eyes.
Right.
It reminds me of that with like these, just mutated type characters of villains who are capturing humans for food. They refer to them as feast or food or whatever. And so you have two groups, they're together, but one group is behind the other. And then you have this character that's showing up and dispelling this group of like mutants. And look at that character with like the dog head is part of his design. Like that's pretty cool. And talk about like Rick Veitch and Turtles. That guy could easily be in one of those Turtles issues.
You know what was making me think about this entire time, especially this Rat-a-tat-tat, it was Corbin, like Ralph comics and stuff. But also when you get the little polka dot eyes guy, then I start to get into like Roy Crane, because you have like Captain Easy and Wash Tubbs. What's funny about this piece, and it's the disparity between like art and the art and lettering, is that's a Uzi silencer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that seems like something Hama would have been pointing out to those guys. I see the wood, Larry Hama being like a wood assistant for a bit. Like that
was Ralph
totally like you're pulling that out.
Yeah, totally, man. And he's also the design of him is almost like that Alka-Seltzer mascot character.
Right.
Super cute, but he's the biggest badass of all of them.
Yeah, Dr. Death.
And he has the running theme of saying that I know. And it actually is, the beats of it is Kurtzman-like, where he's like, I know, and then there'll be like a third, like, do you know everything? And he's like, no, I don't know this thing. And that beat plays out a couple of times. And that's a Kurtzman rhythm to me.
Kind of makes me wonder whenever you think of like, okay, the prompt is violence, so we have these mutant horror movie kind of extras. This guy looks like he could be a Simpsons character, by the way.
Yeah.
Maybe if Bob Fingerman came in and helped out on that panel. But then like the other flip part is like you've got the most violent of all of these is your kid.
Yeah.
So I wonder like what exactly statement or idea here is Larry Hama trying to get across? Is this a Dark Knight lift? And by that I mean Dark Knight lifting this panel.
Right.
It feels like whenever Batman shoots those guys in the building.
I know what you mean.
It's very close to that. I'm super impressed by the art though throughout this series. It's very entertaining.
I would read 1,000 pages. Like there's a poor innocent guy, and then our Dr. Death comes through, and he's got to get these dudes, and shoots through him in the head. Like this is that shit. Like when that last time I saw somebody get shot, it was this kind of deal where there's a bar fight, and then I would be standing where the camera is. Dude pulls out a gun and shoots a guy in the stomach right here like 4 times. And there is a crowd full of people on this side directly behind that guy who is watching the bar fight, you know? So like, and the guy shot a lot of times, like any of those people that were just standing there could have got fucking taken down.
That's hard to even believe.
Very scary.
I can't imagine. Other parts of this story is like you have these girls who are somewhat like damsel in distress, but then also very capable.
Yeah,
like
Valkyrie's baby.
Cutting herself out with the axe before she's then impaling a guy, busting his head in half. How about that's pretty fun for cartoon violence. But I also wonder like with these kind of sound effects, it does feel like there's a huge cartoon element in this story. So again, I say like, what are we doing? Just selling violence to kids? Is that the comment? Because that's the best I can do if I'm going to tell you what's intended here. Great panel, man. The reflection of the gun foreshortened in the glasses, super cool.
Yeah, like this story here feels the closest to like the underground comic anthologies. You got this guy, like, yeah, he's within the parameters and the trappings of Marvel Comics, but we looked at stuff like maybe East Village Other, or like some of the Gothic Blimp Works. Larry Hama has pages in Gothic Blimp Works right alongside other mainstream dudes like Mike Kaluta, Catherine Jones, but Von Baudet, Kim Deitch. So he's got those like legs in both of those fields and stuff.
Hey, you think this is marker, isn't it?
I do think it is
marker. You can see little dashes and stuff that give that away. Like the strokes are very clear there.
Yeah, if you look at the title, the Dr. Death stuff, you could see the marker like touching. You could see it there too, but you could totally see the sort of marker kind of touching. So, yeah, these guys. Hama's pedigree is pretty fascinating because he was with Wood, but he was also a crusty bunker.
Yes.
So he's got all those tricks.
Yeah, it makes for very nice pages. Interesting that he goes in the different direction of becoming, really just a writer and editor as opposed to an artist.
Yeah.
All right, so this is our Bill Sienkiewicz story here, and it's another big piece. I guess this is before he's doing New Mutants, so maybe around the end of Moon Knight era.
Yeah.
And, still in that, a lot of Neil Adams still visible on these pages.
Totally. And starting to read this, like literally this caption here, I was like, yo, this is a continuation of Thrill Kill. Because it talks about, like, she's the wife of the guy who went on a fucking murder spree. So I'm like, oh, dude, this is Thrill Kill Part 2.
Yeah, that's pretty good reading there. But no, it's a movie. Right. And this is the movie review for it. And we have the movie reviewer in the theater complaining about the movie. Meanwhile, there's an executioner type sitting behind him, also seems to be unhappy with this movie.
Right.
So they crossed paths there early. Got to wonder what the originals look like for something like this in terms of how it's reproducing. It's very splotchy.
Yeah, very muddy. It's dicey, man. Playing with the darker values of gray on this kind of paper. We've seen it a lot in digital. Whenever like the late '90s and stuff, when dudes were using gray tones on the computer, it's like don't go above 50, and maybe 50% gray is too much even. Like when I was doing WYSIWYG, I stuck at like 20 and 40, and because like when I was doing printouts and stuff, that was the Derek Kirk Kim palette basically. Like I didn't get it from Derek. I was just doing my own experimentation and holding it up on like similar paper and stuff, and I'm like, okay, 20%, 40%. It's good to have two values.
Yeah.
But you cannot go very dark because it'll get dark.
And what's happening is the actors from that movie are being murdered. And so our film critic decides it's that executioner type that was sitting behind him in the movie theater, tries to convince the police who are like, you're a crazy person. So takes it upon himself, he's going to go try to save these people. And he tries to track down like where they live, but he's, coming in late. Boy, that's a lot of explanation, and this story really kind of falls apart the more you dig into it.
Jimmy, I couldn't read this one. I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just comment on the artwork.
Well, keep commenting, but like the artwork's nice. Yeah. I like seeing Sienkiewicz do some of this stuff where, like you'll see like some marker grays coming into this.
Yeah, here's some more examples of that. But like the sort of, he's sort of at that bleeding edge period, and he's kind of new, a little unsure of himself. So this comic looks like, I have these like, emergency comics from Charlton that are Krusty Bunker Productions, and this looks like it, where you could kind of see the new, like when you get something that's Krusty Bunkers, you could see where Neil Adams really touched a panel or two or something, and like that's how this works, where you could see like the Neil Adams-ish panel that's like the most Neil Adams-ish, but then you have the like also ran Tom Grinberg type energies throughout.
I liked this sequence where our reporter guy is in 3 panels and turning his head, and they're all the same. This is like your argument for a tangent, right? Like how to use a tangent, where it's almost like the animation of him turning his head. But some of the tangents are like his hand that makes the jawline, but it's not quite right.
Yeah.
But I do like that kind of almost like animated technique. Something I haven't seen before. At least I don't remember seeing something quite like that. But again, going back to the theme of this issue and what's this story about, I have no idea.
Yeah, like I said, I couldn't read it. This made me think of Dave Cooper's Gun Fury.
That's interesting to compare that. Yeah, the visual. And Dave Cooper did several of those, where it was like grays being reproduced on black and white newsprint, and dot gain just really making it 50% darker than probably intended. All right, this is John Byrne. I didn't even know what to say. I guess it's anti-censorship. Violence wears many faces. I don't know.
Violence against books.
This is another one. This just confused me a lot. What is this even made from? It looks like 3D digital art, and that is not what they had it in 1982.
No, like the closest thing that you get is like very rigorous airbrush.
Yeah,
work.
That's what I came up with. Bizarre. Like imagine even trying to figure out this. Like somebody showed up with airbrush skills, and you're like, can you do these cartoon rabbits?
Once again, this very likely could have been a continuity. Like you could show off this page to an enterprising client and say, we have this aesthetic approach that we can do. So they have it. Now this is called what is it called? Recondo Rabbit.
Yes.
And Larry Hama is creator of Bucky O'Hare, Bucky O'Hare, before the DC implosion, was gearing up to be a DC comic. So it's like he had this rabbit thing.
That's really interesting. That makes a lot more
in the
sense for this whole
chamber.
story.
Yeah,
Like this is continuing R&D
right.
towards what that would end up being, and also combined with stuff like I think he was the editor on the Nom, and then of
You're
course
right.
wrote GI Joe, known to be a veteran. So you really see that part of it, that story of like combat, which many of his stories seem to have an element in there, but just combined with these cartoon characters. It made me wonder too, like between like this airbrush style versus the line art. Do you think he's drawing the line art? And the other guy's doing the airbrush. It's weird to me to think that the guy that's doing this airbrush is also drawing this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it looks different. And see, like, here's why you can't answer that, because there's just not enough Larry Hama work out there for us to look at his work and be like, oh, that's clearly Larry Hama. Like that piece that we saw earlier, it's like I would never have said, oh, Larry Hama drew that. I don't have the tools to identify a Larry Hama illustration.
Yeah. Here's the other piece. Now you have two Larry Hama stories in this violent issue. Both of them are almost like cartoon violence.
Right.
Like you see the end result of going through like a firefight in Vietnam, and with our 40-yard stare here of our rabbit character by the end is just scarred. Like if that's not a picture of PTSD, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Man, I wonder, like, in terms of like Vietnam, thinking of like, you would hear Afghanistan was Russia's Vietnam.
Right.
And that's what you end up seeing here is these Russian soldiers end up basically cutting down this Afghanistan town that's presented as if it's civilians. And they basically go in there and just destroy this civilian town.
Presented as a Jack Kirby kids comic.
Yes.
Like the aesthetics don't fit the subject matter like whatsoever.
And the wildest part, I look at this and go, wait, is this a G.I. Joe? Is this the rough for that one G.I. Joe cover? Like, it's the same composition.
Yeah, totally. Like, Trippy going to skip on that kind of thing, man. He's a Romita Raider.
It's bizarre to see these kinds of comics and kind of supposed to be serious.
Exactly. Yeah, and
it's a very awkward fit.
And he's so stuck in the Marvel way of doing things that, like, of all of these comics, as a black and white piece, because like look at all the shit that's going on, he doesn't separate the things. Like he's not drawing for black and white here. He's drawing for color in the same way that he draws for color in any of his other like Marvel works.
It feels like they should be getting superpowers.
I know. That's the October Guard.
Yeah.
Spelled with a K.
Fun to see Trimpy ink himself though, man.
Shane brothers.
That's something. So this was a story probably maybe the standout in this issue for me because you don't see that much Bissett. And
what a special creator! Like every time I see his stuff and I look at this, I'm just like, oh, I wish he would have just stayed, because he could own comics. He could own the medium of comics. He could have had a name up there with anybody. And by the way, like I'll put it out there, man, because I saw Scott Dunbier on Facebook putting a call out for pieces. For future artist editions, and he said, does anybody have Swamp Thing art by Bissett Toddlebin? He put the call out.
Let's amplify that signal.
Yeah. Maybe that could be an episode. That could be a conversation. And I told him Billy Ireland has a key 2-pager that you got to get your hands on.
So this story, again, I'm a little disconnected in exactly what happens, but it's two kids that are kind of outgrowing their No Girls Allowed clubhouse. One of them is becoming more and more unhinged, eating bugs, and then trying to make his friend kind of follow suit, just very reckless. And a girl has kind of entered their circle.
Steve Perry's the guy who wrote that Time Spirits comic for Epic, drawn by Tom Yates, which you could find in the quarter bins. And I recommend picking it up, if nothing for like the Tom Yates artwork is plenty. Like that's a reason to buy the thing.
Yeah, enough said. Yeah, I remember looking through that thing whenever I was younger and being like blown away by his art. I would love to see what these originals look like as well, because there is some media on these pages.
And it's very possible that it's in color. I feel like I've seen this before, and he's just great as like getting to the cartoony. Now he's got a style that like I see like what Bissett's shit looks like, but I like the cartoony. He was doing stuff for Heavy Metal. He was doing stuff for Epic Illustrated. All of that stuff was color. So it's very possible that this could be Doc Martin dye colors.
Interesting. I never would have even thought that direction, but yeah, interesting call. And you can imagine this being like a Warren
Lush.
story or something like that
Oh,
too.
I see. Yeah. Because like they would use he and Veach, they would use the Doc Martens, because like Joe taught us that like to like use Doc Martin dyes as paint, and when you shine the light and you scan those fucking things, Easter egg colors, man. Think of that 1941, or I have those collections like Shiny Beasts and stuff that Veach put out, like just so poppy.
So the kid ends up kind of the one that's going unhinged. His friend is like, got to try to save this dude. He's in some kind of trouble. And this is the part that confuses me is the girl that we saw earlier is now basically dead on this gurney, covered up under a sheet, presumably dead. And it just kind of falls apart to me. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that.
Right.
Nailed to the wall, though, and a piece of her clothing. So I don't know if that's a sexual trespass and this is the symbol of that, or if the guy just killed her with a hammer.
Yeah, The Good Son. It's that Macaulay Culkin movie.
Yeah,
I'm
bizarre.
gonna be honest. I couldn't read this one either.
All right, Bucky Bizarre. Let me see who this is because we don't have the copyright there at the bottom. Steve Skeets and Steve Smallwood. And I wanted to look that up because I think this art's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like Marvel, but man, look at the cross hatching on this like spaceship. I think is just exquisite.
Absolutely. It's a very verbose, like Von Baudet treatment, because Von would have the rounded corners of the panels, that kind of lettering, these kind of vehicles, but the voluminous nature of the text is pretty far out, man.
You know what? It's beautiful lettering. Like it almost looks like it should be mechanical because it's so well done.
I think it is Leroy lettering on italic,
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, okay.
because you could choose to do italic.
But pretty bizarre. Like no comics look like this.
Mm-mm.
And you know, I don't know how many more comics these guys did either in this kind of style, but this is a sci-fi time traveling cartoon type character who ends up in the 1930s whenever his time traveling ship kind of breaks down, and he comments on the what a violent time to show up, which I guess, you know, they're gangsters and stuff. Maybe in the 80s you were thinking the 30s was like the most violent time. I don't know. Very bizarre, but it's a shootout between a bunch of gangs that are trying to run this distillery. I have no idea. A lot of this issue, like here we are at the end, and I'm going, I don't know.
They're filling pages.
You know, we're gonna look at a comic scene magazine that has Shooter and company talking about these Marvel black and white magazines, and they say we can't even give them away.
Yeah.
I kind of understand it. Like, it's an all-star team of creators here, and it's cool to see these different artists, but there's nothing here that I take away or think about. Like, I'm not going to think about this issue on the ride home.
No, not at all. And they all read this way, and the Conans are this way, where it's like exceptional craft on the page, certainly in terms of the visuals,
and nothing to say.
Nothing at all, and not even like giving you a little beginning, middle, and end piece. You know, recently we did the Neil Gaiman masterclass, and we talked about like, is it worth it? Is it not? Like, what did we pull from it? And he has this great quote that like has stuck with me for the past week, and probably is now in here, you know, in my mind. And he said that like he was told that a short story is the last chapter of a novel that you'll never write. And I think that that's a great thing to keep in mind if you're dabbling with this kind of thing, because that gives you some structure to hang your strip on, you know, establish a world, this kind of thing. None of these have that. And the work that you have to do as a reader, you leave exhausted. You know, I left this comic exhausted. And then you think about it, right? Like the Marvel magazines. There's not one that's put up there as like, you got to get this one. People have asked us, and in fact, I don't know if you chose this specifically, but like people have asked us to do this issue. And it was cool. I like seeing Hama's piece, and one of his characters like is the grown-up version of one of my characters. Like that's, I'm using that. But yeah, it's historically, it makes me think about those mags, and then, you know, when you come out of it on the other end, there's no masterpiece.
I think of the part in the Neil Gaiman class where Karen Berger questions him about the Sandman issue that he's talking about and says, why do I care?
With all of these, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know that I care about any of these stories.
Yeah, it would have required the writer to do some real work.
Yeah, some nice art, but I don't know, man. Story-wise, I didn't connect with it.
Good to go?
Yes. Hey, you want to record the end piece or you want to do the comic scene right now?
Do the comic scene. And then we can do the end piece. Like it just gives my phone a lot of juice. What if we do that color background, Jimmy?
Oh, yeah, we could. This is... Yeah, you know what? I intended to do a color background on both.
Right. I told Alika to get ready, man, and get some good running shoes on, because like on my first day at Tokyo, like the stuff that I like to do on day one is put eyes on all the mandarakes. Like go to the one in Akihabara to start, then go to Nakano Broadway, and then go to Shibuya and just kind of do a quick kind of glance at all of them. But you're covering mileage at that point.
I went hiking with him whenever we were in, last time we were in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty good hike. Mm-hmm. And he's wearing flip-flops. And I think that might have broke. One of them might have even broke on the hike. And he's like, "It's all I ever wear, flip-flops."
Yeah, like I told
Flippers.
him, because like also he's got the Hawaiian blood. And it's not like it's like Pittsburgh cold out there, but like he's got the Hawaiian blood, you know, like the California people I go out there with are like super chill on November. So like you got to have something, and it's rainy. So like have some waterproof joints. I got these boots, dude. I just bought these boots that like totally solve everything. Cause like those Adidas soles that are like the foam are just a great, like it's unbelievable. And it's basically that sole with a good tread on a boot, on a waterproof boot. And I gave it a couple spins around the neighborhood on my walks this past week and stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm set, dude. Like, maybe I won't be bow-legged. Look at this bullshit, dude. 3222, what are you talking about? But it's always that first day, dude. Like, I'll do over, look at that dumb shit. I'll do like over 20 miles. And just be fucking wrecked. I bet if I
try stopping that, that's not right. That's so weird.
Yeah.
It didn't even stop the way it usually stops. Yeah. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, hit it.
Yeah, and of course you don't start the way we want to start. You cockfuck.
Cartoonist Kayfabe is a daily comic book YouTube channel. We have over 1,500 videos in our archives, and you can search those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Go under the search bar, enter your favorite title or favorite creator. We may have a video waiting for you. We are partially brought to you by the Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. We have 3 different levels that will give you access to our videos early, and at the King Kayfaber level, you will be the first one in line to see all of our videos because you sit in on the recording session. This will give you first crack at whatever books we're talking about and showing off before they disappear or go up in price. So check out our Patreon, see which level suits you best. And finally, our next public appearance will be December 16th in New York City at Big Apple Con. Come on out. It's been a while since we've done a show in New York. So coming out, bring some of our books for us to sign and say hello in person.
Yeah, looking forward to that show. And looking forward to talking about Comic Scene issue number 1, Jimmy.
Pretty cool to be looking at this book, Ed, because when I start getting into comics in the late 80s, early 90s, this is what I would find, or
Yeah.
Comic Scene magazines. Occasionally I'd get them at the newsstand where I was buying my comic books from, but I would just scoop up anything I could. And Comic Scene was pretty good. It would have like advanced art, so you might see some penciled pages. It covered a wide variety of stuff. Indies, stuff outside Marvel, DC. It was always something I'd never heard of. Comics history with strip artists. So it's just a very good sample. And it was kind of cool. So this is 1981, their premiere issue. It's coming out from the people that do like Starlog.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say nerd culture, geek culture. And they basically were looking around, and from word in their office and word on the street, it's like comics have a popularity to them, but they don't have a mainstream representation. We think we can do one.
Yeah, it's true. So many thoughts in mind when we are going through this thing, man, because they say up front in the editorial, and I would see this on the set. I never picked one of these up because if I would glance at it at the Walden Books, at the mall, that's where I would see it. At least at that time, probably post 89, it's got photo covers of like whatever the movie du jour, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that kind of stuff, and it's like much more steeped in that kind of thing. And it gave me nothing but superficial, which is interesting because like that's the first time you saw Crow, and there's like the Image one and stuff.
First time I saw Weapon X, Barry Windsor Smith.
Yeah, like I was shitting on it at that point because I'm just like, oh, it's not deep enough. But the things that I was thinking about is really in relation to our YouTube and shit, because this is like, there are several other kind of comic channels that have like immense popularity, and there's a newer dude, I don't even remember his name, but he has like 9 videos, and some of them have like over 1 million, and that's like reportage. Like he cannot do what you or I do. He has no skin in the game. He is going through Wikipedias and like reading articles and kind of giving you overviews, and like that's what Comic Scene is in a way. Now this is a very good treatment, and I can't wait to go through this with you, but it acknowledges stuff like Comics Journal that is much deeper, and there's even an ad for a Comics Journal in here. So this is the mall version of comic magazine, just like some of those YouTube channels are like the broad for everybody kind of thing, and that's going to yield the bigger audience because most people don't give a fuck about the rendering on the ankle muscle that we'll be talking about and stuff like that. So it's something to keep in mind for our own purposes. Like maybe we do some reportage here and there.
I'm very curious about this magazine in general because when I'm reading it, like it goes into Image coverage. Like it's around for at least a dozen years.
Yeah.
So it's successful in regards to being able to run a glossy full color magazine.
This volume 1 is like 6 issues or something, and then it goes away for years.
It doesn't go away too long.
Yeah, it goes away for a little while, and then it comes back. But then it becomes, it's the Hollywood stuff that becomes the big deal.
Hollywood stuff's in this first issue. It's always been almost like their strategy for anybody talking comics.
Right.
I like this design, the Saurian mask.
Yeah, is that from Enemy Mine? Was Enemy Mine out in 81? You know that one?
Yeah, I do. Rose Gossett Jr.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I forgot about that.
I never saw that movie, so I'm not sure, but the characters did look a little bit like that.
Man, that shit was on, like, HBO in the 80s would play the same movie fucking 5 times a day.
So one thing to keep in mind at home, this is January 81. This is the beginning of the 80s, like right in the beginning. And that means very early comic book stores and very early direct market, which is talked about here almost sideways by like the Marvel, by some of the veterans. It's almost like they're not sure what to make of it yet.
Yeah.
And it's almost viewed suspiciously. So Carrie O'Quinn is the publisher, not always going to be delivering this intro, but just setting it up, the series, or, launching this new magazine. Why did we do this? And publisher weighs in on that. And what I take from this is, comics up to this point had been represented by fans.
Right.
We're going to go mainstream.
Yeah. Yeah, and he acknowledges we're not going to make your fanzines go away. We're going to try something a little differently. I think this is a very good magazine. With all the stuff I say about the reportage and stuff, I think it's very well represented. And this first issue, it does feel like they're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what's going to connect. But I think it does it seamlessly.
There's a real vision represented by this editorial. I look at a bunch of these first issues, like Amazing Heroes is one that we talked about, which is kind of the Comics Journal superhero genre magazine. And the first issue is very different than what that magazine shapes into. I feel like this first issue pretty indicative of what comic scene is.
Yeah.
And I think that that's outlined very clearly here. Like this is they identify as professional comics magazine. And I think that that's on display throughout, and by that, I mean, they figured out what the magazine was going to be before they released issue 1. So issue 1 is a part of that. Open up with our kind of a news item, what kind of stuff is coming up. Here's some stuff to look out for if you're a comics fan. Top piece is premiere of Destroyer Duck,
Right.
which goes very well with the Howard the Duck movie adaptation as your B story.
Right. This piece is sculpted by Stan Winston, and he really comes into his own when he's doing like Predator and some of his other designs like much later. I didn't know that he was doing work on stuff like Howard the Duck. And this is still very old. Like I think the Howard the Duck movie is closer to 86.
84 maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know
some
the
years
year,
away.
but yeah, it is some time out, which is pretty interesting to consider because like they talk about it like, well, we don't want the legal issues to, create a problem here. I wonder if they did, if that was part of the delay issues.
Yeah. It's a very expensive enterprise. 1982 plans for new titles debut, including G.I. Joe. And what's fascinating and interesting about this, when you dig into the history, is that G.I. Joe was such a tough sell to retailers that I think, if you believe the kayfabe, Jim Shooter offered it returnable to people as like a special thing, even through the direct market. So many stores did not participate, and it created a situation of underordered number 2s. That issue number 1, I think it went into reprints, and I think it's like one of the early like Marvel type comics to go into reprints. And the issue 2, because of the scarcity, it was worth more than issue 1 for a long time there.
But I wonder that doesn't happen more frequently.
If you look at the numbers and the scarcities and stuff, like the number 1s are always the most plentiful, and it's always gets the biggest.
That's what I'm
reward.
saying.
It's really stupid.
Yeah, it's an inverse of traditional supply and demand. It's manipulation of the market.
Like with the Red Room stuff, for instance, the sketch cover variant for issue 1 is a second printing. There's like 4,000 of them.
Their other launch is Team America. Doesn't do quite as good as G.I. Joe.
No.
The motorcycle issue.
If you could pull back real quick, Jimmy, and check that one part out.
This is like NASCAR repairs.
There we go. Maybe we should lock it in again. How can you have your hands in 2 places at once, Jim?
All special effects. That's the magic of editing.
Yeah. And maybe actually fix your camera.
You can't move that one.
All right.
So other Marvel plans or debuts, they're playing with format. That includes a Wolverine miniseries, Vision, and the Scarlet Witch miniseries. So you're seeing Hercules, like this is they're starting to bring in these other formats.
Yes, and that's super noteworthy. So like they're lining up the Wolverine to be like their first miniseries, they're saying. And it said maybe probably Frank Miller's going to be the guy to do it. So that's totally noteworthy.
Yeah, and you know what? It makes me wonder, like, this issue is January 81. They're talking about 1982 plans. Like, are they really talking a year out? Feels like something's wrong with the dates on
Yeah,
this stuff.
it must be January 82. But look on the cover, like the front cover.
Well, they have it in here as... Oh, I saw it in here somewhere. Well, January up here, and then copyright 1981, but it doesn't make sense. Like, it would need to be... I just don't think you're pushing a year out.
Nah.
But then some of their creative teams are wrong, so it makes me wonder, like,
right,
maybe it's not as professional yet. There's some kinks there still. But it's interesting to me to see like what they're actually publishing at this time. Star Trek. I didn't realize they were publishing Star Trek, but sales are not good.
Right, it's going away with like issue 15 or something. Like it's they gave it a year and a half or something, and it's going nowhere. I have a couple of those, and they are boring. Like Star Trek is pretty whack compared to Star Wars.
I'm gonna guess that this is January '82, and that this thing came out like magazines do in late '81.
Mm-hmm.
Blade Runner and Annie. There's a lot of licensing that goes on underneath Jim Shooter, so you get some of that.
So Annie, the
movie adaptation.
Okay, that's going to be important for when we get to the Swamp Thing piece.
All right, so of course you have to do DC News, and they're changing around their editorial. Giordano becomes this managing editor person who I kind of think of as a guy I've underrated his influence on comics, but it seems like he's the guy who's dealing with all kinds of talent and bringing them in and really kind of pushing DC.
Right. Neil Adams' Miss Mystic with Pacific Comics. They talk about its origins, and there was actually a lawsuit where Miss Mystic is concerned because that dude Michael Netzer was a part of continuity, and he says he created Miss Mystic as a crusty bunker. Neil Adams kind of took it, and it was established in those early portfolios and stuff. So like that was an actual lawsuit that had to be settled and things. We talked about that, the Muppets comic strip, and how newspapers were bidding on it, and the syndicate was even doing work to figure out the creative team. And I think, man, this looks good. That looks really good, dude. Say Walt Kelly's a big influence on them, and you could see it there with the lettering and just the pagination, the way the panel borders are. Like, I would love a collection of that. I would love to read that. That looks special.
Yeah, I'd be very curious about that. What did we cover that for? I remember us talking about it, but do you remember what the context was?
Yeah, it could have been like an Amazing Heroes, or it was a magazine that we were looking at. We got to that. It might have been a later comic scene that we looked at or something, because I was shitting on it. I was like, I never heard of that. Like, I never seen that. And in the article, they were talking about how there was bidding wars for that strip.
Yeah. Alvin and the Chipmunks. This is what you get though with Comic Scene, is this cross section where an Alvin and the Chipmunks can be next to Dick Giordano being
it's all
managing
for kids.
editor.
Go ahead.
An overview of the Undergrounds. This is kind of fun too, because you see like they reference Undergrounds on page 6. It's actually page 10. So again, new magazine, working out some kinks, but just kind of running down like they do. Like, here's Marvel news, here's DC news. Now you're going to get Rip Off Press, Last Gasp, Kitchen Sink, some of the indie / underground publishers and what they're up to.
And what was cool is like all the key names are still mentioned. You know, like those publishers are still doing stuff with the key guys.
Yeah, it's pretty good to have this magazine where you go from Alvin and the Chipmunks to Robert Williams and S. Clay Wilson working on Cocaine Comics. Star Reach is referenced. So pretty interesting, like what's happening. You know, Bizarre Sex, which is the first appearance of Omaha. They misspell it as Omaha, the funny animal character. Jay Lynch. So you have these underground names that we know from different places, all still being represented here.
Gilbert Shelton, S. Clay Wilson up there. And this is key. This is an important thing, man. I remember grabbing my first Wizard and seeing Dave Cockrum's name, and like it's installing these names into your mind so that like as you go out and dig for comics, like now you're drawing those connections. Like Seth told us on the shoot interview, where like a big part of your early collecting is to just figure out the medium that you have some passion for.
Yeah, absolutely. Last Gasp is reprinting classic Zap Zero and Zap Number 1. Pretty fun to think of like all this is happening at once. And because of the direct market, you kind of now may have access to all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So Marvel turns 20. This is their big feature here on issue 1, is this overview of Marvel. And it has Jim Galton, who is the president of Marvel, Stan Lee, who is titled publisher at this point, and editor-in-chief Jim Shooter. There's also Jack Kirby, artist, is mentioned here, but somewhat at odds with the rest of the tone of this article.
Absolutely. This is the article that we were talking about where Jim Galton, Jim Shooter, and Stan Lee are letting all of you guys know that, yes, these comics are made for 11-year-olds.
Yeah, they do say that very clearly. This is your history of Marvel. So pre-Marvel Universe, they give a little bit of background, and then they get into the 60s and, of course, creating the Marvel Universe and flawed heroes and how that all goes.
Yeah, and you know, once again, this is the reportage stuff, like those super popular like YouTube channels, like they do the video version of that, where it's just like the very bare bones, catching you up to speed type stuff. Stan the Man today, he says 4,000 times that he doesn't even look at the comics anymore.
It's very interesting because none of these three read the comics before they're published.
Shooter
says
does.
he reads them all once they're published. And lets his editors, like one of his big implements for this, because Marvel had been going through editors in chief like very quickly.
Yeah.
He gets group editors, and it's basically there's so much stuff happening at Marvel, it's impossible for an editor in chief to do it all.
Yeah.
So you have these editors underneath you, and kind of interesting to think like he lets them do their thing. So if they do something wrong, it's going to happen after the book is out. Then we're going to have our talk.
The way it's couched in this article is that he sees the flaws and he just go, oh yeah, go ahead, go off the print, and then waits for it to come in so that he can now school you. That sounds like
that is
fun.
how it's couched. But you know what? It also protects him, because imagine he's wrong, like the classic Stan Lee story of Spider-Man and Amazing Fantasy. Jim Shooter's not ever going to be the guy that said, no, don't publish this character. This is the Kirby piece, which is, he thinks if you create these things that go on to be licensed and make all this money, you should get part of that as the artist. And so like early 80s, and we're getting the Kirby Marvel stuff is flaring up here.
Yeah, it's wild stuff, because like, you know, he's on the other end, right? And he did not envision Underoos and all this stuff and all this Stan Lee Presents bullshit. And he talks very, very scathingly about the creatives. Even he's like, you know, nobody's inventing anything. It's all just selling old rope. Nobody has a point of view. Nobody has anything to say.
Yeah, there's no advantage for them to produce, the creators today. If comics are not allowed to grow and you discourage people from creating, you're going to get a static product. That's really interesting, that if you discourage people, because I do think that the business practices are, you're discouraged.
Yeah,
there's
no
reason for you to create a new character and go to one of these companies that won't owe you anything, not even creative control, like nothing.
Right.
There's no incentive. So it is discouraging you from being creative.
Yeah, we looked at that Cosmic Odyssey book, and that's Mignola and Jim Starlin. These guys, you know, they know what happened to Kirby, and there has to be an introduction of this like Galactus-like villain who's going to destroy the four worlds and everything. What does Mike Mignola come up with? Like a shape. Because why the fuck would he give DC Comics something that they can make toys of? He doesn't prosper from whatsoever. Now, there is the Stan Lee fucking company man part. This is the part that makes Stan Lee so unlikable, because he's such like a company whore that's like, he'll say stuff like, you know, we knew what we were signing. We knew what the practices were of the day. And I knew that no matter what I was creating, it was the property of the publisher. So it's about honesty. And these creators are being dishonest when, you know, they sign their rights away and years later start crying about not having their rights. They knew what they were getting into. I knew what I was getting into. And the golden parachutes that he's been afforded his whole life, to go read that Marvel Untold Stories book by Sean Howe. There's a part in there during like the Jimmy Palmiotti fucking Joe Quesada era, where whoever owns it at that time is like, who's this guy Stan Lee guy that we're paying $1.5 million to a year? Like, let's clear the books with this guy. Stan Lee comes in there, and by the time he leaves the conversation, his yearly wage is doubled, and he gets money for his wife as like some kind of some consultant work or something like that. Like the charm that he brings to the game, he doesn't have to cry about the ownership when Jack Kirby, you know, he has to work at Ruby Spears and he has to do all this kind of stuff to make ends meet, because the 10,000 pages that he drew for Marvel, it's not bringing in no dough.
This is a pretty amazing article in a lot of ways, because like today's problems, and it's exactly what you said. Like this is, if you guys want to read exactly Stan Lee's quote, here it is, pause it at home and read it. But they're talking about the creator, you know, problems with these creators. They even cite like the 78 copyright law changes, which is why I think Kirby has more of a stake in this than people who have come in after that. Because it's pretty clear after that, but beforehand there's definitely some wiggle room. But then it gets into like Shooter and the fan press and how like he's just vilified in the fan press. And then we go to Approaches to Comics and they talk about the people who have left Marvel. Len Wein, Marv Wolfman, Jerry Conway, Gene Colan, and even Stan Lee is quoted in here like being surprised by Gene Colan leaving. And I think Colan reached out to Stan Lee like, what the hell's going on? And you know, it's this is like there's some roasting going on here of our subjects.
Totally. And like Shooter talks about, like, yeah, man, like a lot of people talk shit in the fanzines. None of you guys come up to me at conventions talking that smack. So that's funny. And then Gene Colan is a famous one because, like, especially when Shooter tells the story, he says that Gene Colan like literally went to Jim Galton and was like, "This Jim Shooter is giving me so much trouble. I worked here for years before him, blah blah blah." Jim Galton goes right to Jim Shooter and is like, "Who's this fucking Gene Colan douchebag calling me? Like, what am I paying you for, Shooter? How is this guy? How does he have my number? Go handle that." And Shooter says the H word and shit, man, on all his interviews. He's like, Gene Colan was hacking. Gene Colan was being a hack, and I called him on it.
Wow. Yeah, Colan is like I said, Stan Lee weighs in on it. That was a big one.
But then when you like Comic Artist Magazine and stuff, when Gene Colan's doing his interviews and stuff, like he'll say that, you know, he'll get the criticism from Jim Shooter, he'll go home and do none of the changes and turn it in, and Jim Shooter be like, "Yeah, you see how much better it is," and stuff like that. So like everybody's a maniac right there. Like Gene Colan had to go fucking draw some Batman comics.
This is Stan Lee calling out John Byrne's work as somebody who he thinks is really good.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready to do that Silver Surfer one shot, and we covered that on a previous video.
It's going to be issue 2 of Comic Scene with the cog in the wheel quote, which we have a video about that, where it's about John Byrne's depositions during the like Howard the Duck,
yes,
Jack Kirby stuff.
This is where Galton says the average age of Marvel readers is 11 and a half. So keep that in mind, you guys, as we look at some older comics and maybe we point out that they look like they're written for somebody younger.
We've gotten some criticisms, man. What are you talking about, man? The Adam Warlock saga, blah, blah, blah. Get the fuck out of here.
They go through some of their numbers and things like that. I think their top selling books, maybe like 400,000 is about their top.
That's a surprise. But I'm
too high or too surprised by the
too low. And my hope is that that's what sells and not the print run at this time. Like I would imagine like 800,000 print run for 400,000 sales because there are some hype books that like X-Men, right? Like that thing would hit 700K later.
This is Galton who's saying this, and he says that Marvel cumulatively sells 5 million comics a month, no title doing better than approximately 400,000. So it is sales, is what he's saying. So yeah,
okay. So
if you're selling 400,000, you're probably printing 750,000.
Yeah.
All right, Black and White Dilemma. This is where they go through like trying to do comics for older readers. They don't sell, and that's what this is the whole way down. And I think they're planning on pretty much canceling that whole line if they haven't already canceled it.
And as evidence of some of the stuff we checked out on the channel, like they don't have the facility. I wonder if it's some chilling effect stuff, even with that material. But when you read the Creepy and Eerie's, they're kind of shit also. Like you would get a thrill kill once every 100 fucking Warren stories. You know what I'm saying? Like there's not much to hold on to there.
Look, man, I'd say the same thing about most DC comics. There are some exceptions. I think some of the Kurtzman war stories have some meat in the story. I'm just talking story.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, they're rehash plots and they're there for the O. Henry ending. They're there for great artists.
Yeah, and
I think Warren has some of that.
And they're allowed to shine. Like, the Richard Corbin doing the Devil's Pinball Machine is so fucking corny compared to, Joe Orlando putting a little fucking whiskey tap on a dude's jugular vein because they're a bunch of vampires. Like that shit is fucking cool as hell. I would defend EC Comics to my grave compared to any of this other bullshit.
I'm just talking story. I'm not talking about Orlando being really smart in the artwork.
Yeah,
I don't argue with that at all.
Yeah, I hear you.
Media tie-ins. So this is Marvel doing licensed stuff, talking about really Star Wars. I think is what really got them gung ho on the licensing.
They say that Star Wars saved Marvel Comics in the late mid 70s, and G.I. Joe saved them through the 80s.
Interesting.
Before X-Men really hit. And I think they say that the hype comic, like the 400,000 seller is Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't think they say it. It may be Spider-Man, but I don't. Oh yeah, here we go. Yep. Leading seller, Spider-Man. And it sells less than 500,000 copies a month. That's interesting because they cite that 500,000 as like, I guess Superman sells, which at their peak were selling 2 million copies a month, and now that's way down.
Yeah,
and Spider-Man even below that. And this would have been a time I don't know that Spider-Man was doing too well in the early '80s.
Right.
For Spider-Man to be their top seller, It probably is painting a grim picture. But there's a lot of that. Like a lot of this article is about trying to clean up problems that Marvel has had and has had for a long time.
And it's something that Jim Shooter really did. Like there is no kayfabe to that. He's Mussolini, man. He got the trains to run on time.
That's right. That's really that's a big chunk of it. Direct market. So they start talking about that. They've got like 3 series that are going through the direct market, and it's very. I'm telling you, you read this and it feels like we're just not sure what the direct market is yet. We're experimenting a little bit, but we're not banking on it.
Yeah, because they're also ran titles. It's Marvel Fanfare, so it's like an opportunity to use inventory strips. And it's Moon Knight, which is like an experimental piece. And I forget what the other Ks are, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
It feels like, I see Micronauts mentioned. That feels like a bad idea, because that's a toy license. So, like, why would you not have the toy license comic in a place where you could get the toys?
You know what? It must have been bad, because it says they're taking 3 soft titles and they include it. So at that point, maybe Micronauts was on its way out.
Correct. Like, you never saw Micronauts toy in a Kmart, right? Like, that's before our times, man.
Experiments, and this is getting into some of the miniseries, playing with formats. I think they might even start talking a little bit about albums, doing like an album series. One here they mentioned is X-Men by Claremont and Neil Adams. What happened to that one?
Right.
That seems like one that you should go for. But then they also mentioned Death of Captain Marvel, which we know went on to be very celebrated. We have a video on it.
And it is the first of the Marvel quote-unquote graphic novels.
So I like seeing that. I like seeing like Marvel starting to push in this different direction and see what they could do. Same thing, future formats. Talking at this point with paperback, and they did a lot of those cut up the comic page to make it fit the paperback, or just reduce them to very tiny. If you guys at home have not seen those, there are a lot of examples. You can probably find them cheap and do a flip through, and it's kind of interesting to see that stuff. And then licensing, right? Animating Marvel. So got to try to start exploiting these characters to their fullest. And that's where Galton is in here talking.
And that's where Stan Lee is, publisher of Marvel Comics, who doesn't look at any of the comics, is trying to woo Hollywood and make that stuff happen. And one of the things that he does is like fuck up the rights for decades by making terrible shit deals. So like Stan Lee can't even get that right.
Subscription page. Never know how those are going to shake out. And now look, our second feature in issue number 1 of Comic Scene, got to do movie stuff. We've got to do movies.
Right.
It shocks me, like when we go back through these old magazines, how much movies, even the first Comics Journal had a bunch of movie coverage.
Right.
It's such an integral part of like the idea of mainstreaming comic books.
Yeah, because I mean, like look at what we're looking at, man. We're looking at nerd shit here, man. Conan, Lone Ranger and Tonto,
Tarzan,
Swamp Thing. By the way, I was down with all this stuff. I remember there was like a Lord Greystoke TV show when we were kids and shit. I was super into that. That dude Michael Uslan is mentioned with the Swamp Thing and the success of Swamp Thing, and it's before the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, and he got the rights. He is nobody. He was like a lawyer or something, just like a regular dude, and he got the rights to Swamp Thing, but he also got the rights to Batman in like 78, 79, because there was no thought of like making movies of that stuff. The superheroes are totally shit upon. The Batman was dead in the water with that pop culture, like the Biff Man Pow type Batman stuff. So like in our shoot interview with Steve Bissett, we talked about how he and Totalbin got the worst rates at DC Comics, the lowest rates to do Swamp Thing, because Uslan, when he got the rights to Swamp Thing, because he was like a mark for Bernie Rice and shit, he got all rights except for publishing. So the money that DC made on Swamp Thing was only for the comic books. They couldn't make a poster because Michael Uslan would get the rights on that. So for 10 G's, Uslan gets the Batman rights because they didn't like think that anything would happen with it. And what he's even talking about in here, he had to be the happiest guy whenever Frank Miller comes around, because what he's talking about here is really, and this is 3 years after he got the initial rights, he's talking about like trying to do a more serious version of Batman. And the only thing that he has to reference is the Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil shits. So they talk about that in here. Now, when he's pushing throughout these 80s, because like they're talking about, we're going to start filming soon, blah, blah, blah. That Annie movie that we mentioned earlier, that shit the bed. And so like these movie producers all put all of that stuff, Flash Gordon, Annie, hey, it's from the funny pages, like, and it's not hitting. So fuck your Batman movie or whatever.
Right.
Whenever Frank Miller comes out, dude, he had to be fucking jerking.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was paying religiously, that 10 G's a year or whatever for a decade.
That's amazing.
And,
Greatest investment ever.
And his name is still on stuff. It's on the cartoons. On every documentary, he's there. So like that dude, hand over fist, man. But he believed in it, and he was in debt for, making no money on it, just paying out. But he knew that holding on to that, like holding on to his fucking balls, was going to pay off at some point. And his impetus was to do a serious Batman.
You know what? Good on him for not getting rid of it, because like it has it outlined here that Polygram expects to release Batman through Warner Brothers in the fall of '82. So whenever that date comes and goes, and like now superheroes have tanked or whatever, dude kept hold of it.
Yeah, it took a decade. He got it like 78, 79, and then the movie comes out, in 89 or whatever.
Check out this ad, Connecticut comic book stores. These are not like a chain of one store. These are all a bunch of Connecticut stores. Let's get together and take out an ad. I love it, man.
Very expensive. Like this is a newsstand magazine, man, and this could be $5,000 of 1980s money. It could be.
And you might have got your distributor paying a little bit of that too, because all stores serviced by Chimera Publishing Distributing Inc.
I never even heard of that.
I haven't either, but I just love the idea of like this message is brought to you by Connecticut comic shops.
Yeah,
it's outside the box thinking, especially a bunch of probably some competition there.
Sure.
I bet some of the stores did not like each other, so more power to them. Article on Fandom, we see in the editorial that we're going from fandom to professional, but you still gotta kiss the ring. And this kind of outlines the history of comics fandom, being part of like sci-fi conventions and things. You see names like Outer Limits, Prisoner, Lost in Space, Star Trek, but then also becoming their own thing, as this photograph's a really good example of it.
Absolutely. It does have the Hollywood connection that's kind of always been there. So when we talk about how crazy San Diego Comic-Con has gotten, that is true. But Hollywood was always a part of it. And a lot of those guys, they say that Star Wars would not... They had this concentrated group of people that were able to spread the word. So things like even the Star Trek movies would never have been a twinkle in anybody's eye if it wasn't for the intense concentration of fandom who got together and organized.
Kind of interesting to see these like early conventions being mentioned too. San Diego, Creation Con, World Con.
Mm-hmm.
I love this stuff. I've become more and more of a fan of this kind of like history of fandom and the evolution of it.
It's important.
It is important. It's really cool to see this stuff. And a lot of it has been somewhat phased out, even though like now conventions are like half a dozen a weekend. And, it's in some ways exploded. And they even talk about it here as it's less special now because there's so many of these. Boy, look out, guys. What's coming down the pike is going to blow you away. Character profile Swamp Thing. How mad must a company like DC be if somebody else has all the rights to Swamp Thing except the comic, and that's the one who's able to generate some features,
yeah, man,
some attention.
Adrian Barbeau flick out.
You mentioned Tom Yates earlier, or maybe a previous recording, but this is a piece of Tom Yates' Swamp Thing art. This was some of the early art that I had found. I got a digest. DC used to put out like, I don't know, best of the year kind of digest that would collect maybe half a dozen stories. And I remember getting hold of one of those, who knows how, and the Tom Yates Swamp Thing was in there.
That's nice.
And it's pretty haunting.
He's good in black and white. He builds his work for black and white.
Oh, they were in color.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, but this is beautiful in black and white. But I just remember this image and just being like, oh yeah. Like one of the first ones that I just stared at and pored over and had no idea it wasn't, Bernie Wrightson. To me, it was the coolest looking thing I'd ever seen.
He's great, man. He's strong. Right now he's drawing the Prince Valiant strips.
Yeah.
Mark Schultz.
Scorchy Smith. So another thing that Comic Scene would do is they would look at comic strips and Cartoonist.
This is great. And it's Ron Goulart who's done many, many great books about the history of comics.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I've got several books of his on my shelf that are impressive that I liked the book long before I realized, oh yeah, this is the guy's name that's on several of these.
So Jimmy, this is beautiful. It's Scorchy Smith. It's not Terry and the Pirates or Flash Gordon or some big name thing. It's fucking Scorchy Smith, and we're going to celebrate Noel Sickles for a while, and then we're going to talk about Frank Robbins taking over, and the pain period in between. So this is a beautiful education that you're getting with top tier talents that are like lesser known.
Yeah, and they give Sickles credit for really inventing that style that Kniff kind of makes super popular of black and white, high contrast, almost realistic style. And Sickles is pretty clear about that. Like, he brought in this gray because he wanted to have that quality. He said everything was outlined or spotted blacks, and he wanted to have some in-between tones.
Yeah, these guys would do these tricks. Like, they would look at the comics page as a whole. And I remember reading like the Dick Tracy strips. If you, in your mind's eye, think about it, the lettering is very, very big. And that was an effort to just like stick out amongst the comic page to be like sort of the most readable panels.
I like that a lot. I've never heard that before, and it makes total sense once you say it, of course. Noel Sickles, the first artist that they pull out here, is drawing Scorchy Smith when he's part of like the Associated Press, like the bullpen, because he's replacing somebody. He leaves after just a couple of years because you're not set up to make money there. Right. And that's where I started to see this idea of like, there's such a discrepancy between like, I own the strip, or I created it, I'm invested in it, versus like, hey, we're going to hire you to draw this. Same amount of work almost once it's up and running, and yet you're making $125 a week. And, your buddy Kniff over here, look what he's pulling in.
Right. One of the good examples for like that whole system, it's that dude Dick Brown was drawing High and Lotus for Mort Walker, who's the creator of it. And then Mort Walker does Beetle Bailey. Like, he doesn't have time to be drawing 2 strips. So he got it through the Johnstone and Cushing gig. But what that does afford you is that foot in the door with the syndicates. Mm-hmm. So then Dick Brown creates Hagar the Horrible, and that's the joint that he owns, and leaves High and Lois, and then goes and does the thing that he owns.
This is where Sickles talks about, or where they talk about him leaving. He was making $125 a week, putting in 12 hours a day at the drawing board. If he had been, I don't know what the exact name for it would be, but if he had been like the creator or whatever, it's in 250 papers, should therefore be earning the news service something like $2,500 a week, and they're breaking off $125 for him out of that. So
it's jobber shit.
Yeah, it's a huge difference than, say, creator of Terry and the Pirates and getting a nice big chunk of that $2,500 a week. It's
a conversation that we have routinely, man, on and off the camera. Like if you own if you own your comic and it's successful, like it could be $10,000 a page you've earned, and the tap stays on. And when you're with Marvel DC, like they scrutinize it so deeply that like down to the penny of like the page that you drew. Like, so like they won't even give you incentive off the book.
Yeah.
It's per page, and there's a formula in there, and it's always weak.
Frank Robbins is the third guy that they look into, and all these guys are good. It's funny. Scorchy Smith does not last long. They kind of outline, the whole odyssey of Scorchy Smith, because these guys come in and do, a couple years or something, and overall, like, people just don't keep up. Like, they don't find the artist that can match the strip or to elevate the strip besides these couple of guys. And as they move on in their careers, Scorchy Smith quickly disappears. Sticks around because of the quality, I think, probably of Noel Sickles. There's stories of when Toth starts drawing for DC, there's like reproductions of the Noel Sickles pages that get passed around in the bullpen.
Yeah, there are 2 volumes of Sickles Scorchy Smith covering most of 35-36, published by Nostalgia Press in 77, are still available. Nostalgia Press, I don't know how to sell this video, Jimmy, but Woody Gelman at Nostalgia Press is one of the most important people in fandom, period, because he worked at Topps. He created the motifs and aesthetics of sports trading cards, the idea of putting stats on the back and designing it that way. Like, that's his contribution. He's the guy that paid Wally Wood to do the roughs and stuff for Mars Attacks cards. He's worked with people like Wood, all the EC guys, down to Spiegelman. The Nostalgia Press volumes that he's put out of Flash Gordon, the Prince Valiants that you would have seen like in your library, and the most instrumental piece that he ever put out is what they call the Big Book, and it's the first like EC horror hardback collection that like all the OGs, like it's the one that Klaus talks about in our Shuden review, and it's such a coveted thing because it had all, he had the eyes, right? Like it's all this stuff. Like yes, Master Race is in that one. All the Best Kriegstein is in that one. So like I don't know how we do that episode because just nobody will watch it if we don't sell it right. But Woody Gilman is a name that people need to know.
It's wild that somebody of that influence isn't known the way we know the people that we know.
Right.
And I mean, Stan Lee is an exception, but you know, like there's so many of these people that somehow they have been in front of the spotlight for comics history, for fandom, for whatever. And then you have other major influences that just seem to fall away.
I think it's salesmanship, you know,
Yeah.
like the ability to talk on the mic type stuff. But I think one of the other big revelations here is Frank Robbins has been in the game a long time, man.
Yeah, you guys at home may know him as like a Batman artist in the 70s and I guess into the 80s maybe. You know, to give you some perspective, because this is in the 40s that we're talking about his work here. The third guy, Burt Christman, who's a name I don't know.
And he's just a mid Carter.
I think he gets sick, I think is what happens. And no, you know what?
But they also admit that it sucks.
He went, no, he's a standout. He's one of the 3 guys that he says are good. He wanted to actually be a pilot, and that's what he became, a pilot, and was shot down by the Japanese and was machine gunned on his way down, like parachuting.
So know your lane. Like, don't get hyped up on the subject matter of your comic and start beating on your chest. Just stick at the drawing board.
It's after he leaves that things start to go downhill on Scorchy Smith. Here's some of his pages. They're pretty good looking.
Yeah, it does look good. Fantico, baby.
Yeah, Fanico, there's still an iteration of them out there.
This feels like a revelation. Are they the first publisher of Fred Hembeck comics?
I don't know if that's where it first appeared, but they did collections of Hembeck. They were definitely like doing Fred Hembeck comic books, like magazine-sized books. So.
Yeah, he was doing stuff in the fan press, no doubt. But I'm saying just like creating the one-stop shop of Hembeck.
And this is that era of like half a distributor. You know, like they're publishing a few things. They have a store, but they're also almost distro. You know, like, dude, Centerfold piece in here. They're paying some money for that real estate, so you know they're selling some of this stuff. And it's funny to go through like prices because like books are starting to pop up more expensive items. You know, you suddenly have a specialty market. I think that in the Marvel article they talk about that a little bit of the people that are going into those comic shops. Now we got a little older group as opposed to the newsstand kids buying it, which I don't know if that's ever been sorted out by publishers figuring out who they're selling what to. They did a series, Comic Scene did a series creating the comics. Part 1 is writing comics. This article,
very boilerplate.
Berserk. I could hardly make heads or tails. They're talking about different editorial preferences.
Right.
Like this editor likes characters. This editor likes, you know, just give them the plot. Writer-editor conferences, it may go as short as 30 minutes or go on for hours. Like, it is so esoteric what they're talking about here. It is not at all like, listen, have a beginning, middle, and end.
No.
You know, have your characters change. Like, there's nothing like that. It is just like inside baseball of how they're literally selling a plot to Marvel or DC. And it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I like seeing it in a reportage fucking, you know, regular folk magazine. But you're not gonna learn how to write comics with this.
No, there's real no nuts and bolts on that part, but it is interesting to see like my style of writing is not geared for Marvel. I don't like doing the script after the artwork is done. So you do get a little bit of like reference to Marvel method, but again, like this is not writing 101. I'm not sure what this is. This is them figuring out how to talk about process and creation.
Phil Suling, baby. Seagate Distribution.
Yeah, how about that? Like selling direct with some of the stuff, I guess, that they have big stock in.
Yeah. He was an early investor in ElfQuest. Comics Journal ads.
There you go. Still in Stamford, Connecticut, next to Vince McMahon's office.
I was thinking about like designing this ad with like all the film that they have. Like that, like this is a complicated ad to build.
Yeah.
To have the small stats of like all your stuff and glue it up. Like that's a complicated little piece to create. And they had all the materials. They had the big cameras like behind the Fantagraphics building in their shed. They got all the old big computers and all that stuff.
All right, so again, like we're taking a survey of comics all over. Let's look at around the world, in this case, Britain. And they're talking about like the different formats there of like weekly black and white comics, usually a couple of pages per feature. Outline a few artists. Brian Boland's name comes up. I think Dave Gibbons is mentioned by name in here. John Bolton. This is Steve Dillon artwork being pulled out and shown off.
Yeah, and they're talking about other comics. So like 2000 AD is like the hype, but then there's Marvel UK and shit, and that's where this like John Bolton stuff is happening. I was talking with Glenn Dillon when we were in Germany once, and he said that like so many of these dudes, including his brother Steve Dillon, got started in a Hulk UK magazine. That was the first place where they really started to show up.
That's really wild to think that like there are these nexus moments where like a bunch of dudes just happen to be like same place, same time, and think of the creativity that comes out of that group.
Yeah, I mean that is like 2000 AD and stuff. Alan Moore not mentioned, still a little early for that, which is fun.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's not in here. The titles, I'll just read them off because there's just a couple. Victor, Warlord, Tracy, 2000 AD, Whizzer, and Chips, Dandy, and Nutty. So a lot of books that I don't know at all, but it's kind of cool to have them have them featured in here.
We did a video on this right here, and I sort of like we did this video, and then months later they put that book out again in a big treasury edition. I feel like we had some influence on that.
Hildebrandt Brothers.
I'm always curious about those guys because I don't understand the model. I don't know where they come from, and even this, they're already hype at this point. So it's like, well, where the fuck did you start? Like, how did your business work? Because like I just don't know. But they're huge, and they're persistent. But there's not like one defining thing that set it off.
Yeah, I'm with you. I knew them whenever they do like Marvel cards, I guess in the early 90s sometime, whenever the cards are all...
And they were spoken with hyperbole of like, oh yeah, the great Hildebrandt Brothers, we got a good get. And I'm like, okay, the names, now I know the name, now let me like backwards engineer and try to figure out like, but it's just not clear. It's almost like a kayfabe thing that we could do, like where you could just say you're the greatest or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure we'll get some comments filling this in. Like they have cited here in 1978, they held an exhibition at the Maryland Funny Book Festival. So I don't know when they start. This might be another group that's been around for decades before they come on my radar in the early 90s.
Is that
Jack Katz? I don't even know what that is.
It's probably from First Kingdom somewhere.
Well, they make a big mistake by not mentioning that anywhere.
Right.
Sell your books. All right, clearing clouds away. Heavy metal on the upswing with both movies release and a refocused outlook. We're about 5 years into heavy metal being published. Pretty fun collage page here for your illustration. Graphics in this, it's interesting to see like there's no real setup for the graphics in this. Like the companies are not prepared to be like, here's our media kit with some good photos and some good illustrations to use, like, just collaging this together. But we've got new editors, including the publisher has fired Ted White and is taking on that title himself, as well as he has, I don't know if she's an assistant editor, Julie Simmons Lynch, who is quoted a lot throughout this. So maybe she's the kind of working editor with Mogul just being a little bit more hands-on. But it's basically talking about where heavy metal is these days and trying to have a little more stories and not just like, wow, art.
They say the thing that we all know and sort of say, like, you can't read these comics. They're unreadable, and they're unreadable to the editors, they say, man. Now, they do give a little bit of grace, and they're like, this is European stuff, and it has to be translated. So maybe something is being lost in the translation. But almost everybody we talk to from that period, go watch our Steve Bissett shoot interview and stuff, he was getting Metal Hurlant before it was being translated into English and stuff. And he was talking about like, oh, I couldn't wait to read that stuff. But then I was able to read that stuff. And it never sticks with you. Like it's gobbledygook writing, but it does look so freaking cool.
Man, that's another really good example, I think, of like the comics history of there's just not good writing.
Right. Yeah.
It's spectacular
it's
to
the toughest
look at.
part. I mean, dude, I've been sitting on us doing, we got a couple volumes. We have two of the same volumes of Corto Maltese. You never hear anybody say like, this is the great Corto Maltese story. It's like Hugo Pratt's art is dope. And like, that's the video we're going to have to do. It's just like Hugo Pratt. We don't even read the comic, just go through the art and point out the cool things that he does, because I don't know that it's readable.
They talk about, again, like a lot of these articles are very inside baseball. in what they cover.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about doing color separations and why working with these Europeans helps heavy metal because they provide the color separations. How expensive are these color separations? You know, that like that makes a difference in a glossy magazine. Circulation numbers about 150,000. I think they printed a little bit more whenever the movie came out. By the way, the movie gets panned hard here whenever it came out, but very successful. You know, like at this point it's over 20 million, which is a big figure at this time, and talking about making a sequel, which, you know, I guess we'll wait decades for it. But interesting to see like the context of it was successful in its release, but New York Times and stuff are talking about how awful it is.
So I knew the movie before I knew the magazine. It was literally that kind of thing where, you know, you get a new car and then you see that car on the road kind of stuff. Third grade, it was like a midnight show on like Cinemax, but they were promoting it in between movies. And to see just like these badass characters doing adventures and stuff, I'm like, I gotta check out that cartoon. And then like I stayed up late and I watched it, and there's titties and everything, and there's like every color of female pubic hair. So she's got like a white bush you'll see. Then there's like the Long Tomorrow type story where there's a ginger with a big red bush. And I'm like, what am I seeing? I'm like, if my parents wake up and have to pee and they come through this room and they see me watching cartoons with big titty ladies and like a big dick fucking den and like, you know, all the weird shit going on with that. Like, I am not getting a TurboGrafx 16 for Christmas this year.
Your timeline's so funny to me because you're like 5 or 6 years younger. Like it just throws the elements that are around. Like this should be like 1983, right? But it's really like 1980.
It's 1991.
Yeah,
it's 1990. Whenever I discover it, but then after I saw it, because I'm going to the 7-Eleven, I'm going to the Rite Aid to get my comics, and so I recognize that logo like on the racks, and it's a bad title for 1990 because I don't care about Black Sabbath and like Metallica. Right. So I never even fucked with that shit. But I'm like, hey, that has the same title. And I think there might even have been another magazine called Heavy Metal that was a heavy metal magazine or something. Like,
yeah, it wouldn't be too surprising.
So that was not a good title for a young boy in 1990 to like realize that there's magazine style comics with titties in them and stuff.
Well, I'll leave you with this harsh critic from the New York Daily News. They gave the film no stars out of 4 and wrote, "It's hard enough to make a movie out of a good book. Heavy Metal is proof positive that's even stupider idea to try and make one out of a bad magazine."
Yeah, go watch Animal House then, right? That's a National Lampoon joint.
All right, Super Saturday mornings. This is kind of like what's coming, what's on the schedule.
Right, and the one thing that I think is noteworthy is that Jeff Dare was probably working on Super Friends.
Oh man, that's interesting. They talk about like I think there have been iterations of this for like 7 years. Like it's one of the more successful of these long-running Saturday morning cartoons. I don't pull too much out of here except Thundar is coming up, and I think it's Steve Gerber that talks about like the regulations on violence and stuff. Like They can't even have Thundar throwing a punch.
So on the there's a great documentary about the Batman, like the Bruce Timm Batman doc, and they have to acknowledge the Super Friends and stuff first. And there's this one part where they talk about the Batman and Robin. They get shrunken down and they're fighting spiders on it, like the last season of Super Friends. They put a cup on a spider, and from Standards and Practices, they got back that a note that said that we have to know that the spider's okay. So like they had to cut in a little piece where after they solve everything, that like it was just like a little where like the spider's like walking away. So TV was like that bad with like all the kind of censorship and all that kind of stuff, which is like, you know, G.I. Joe, it's guns and stuff. And that's why you have to create the bats so that it's not people getting shot. It's robots. Also, by the way, these miniatures, that's supposed to be Dracula. And it does look like Red Fox from Sanford and Son.
You know what else? These things are like 2.5 inches tall. And I was looking around for a ruler or something. I think these are bigger than the actual miniature figures.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because that would be the size of like those war miniatures and stuff. What I love about this is it's like those Saturday morning ads that would be the center spread in like the comics of the time. Like That's what all this is. And I don't know any of it. I've never seen any of that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that stuff would come and go. You know, like it would be like 1 year,
season,
2 years, and out. Loose Cruz. Howard Cruz would have a recurring column in the in the first maybe volume of Comic Scene. This one is him basically talking about coming up growing up in Alabama, wanting to be a cartoonist, talks about encountering the famous artist cartooning course, gets access to that thing. Takes like 3 years for him to work through there. Pretty cool. And then getting...
We have that, by the way. I remember, like, I borrowed it off of you. You got it off of eBay, like loose leaf papers. And then I borrowed it off of you and made my own Xeroxes. Is that not the Alex Toth composition thing, or is that something else?
I think the Toth composition is a different one. I think it's famous artists. Because there's like at least 2 of those courses.
Right.
So I think it might be from another one of the courses. But there are also, like, they were done in like these big bound volumes.
Right.
And somebody sent one in. Like, we have 1 volume of that between us. It was a 3-volume set, but amazing, amazing resource. And think about, like, generations of cartoonists went through that course, or at least got hold of it and, you know, read it themselves and stuff. Like, that was a really influential piece on the development of cartoonists.
Because they did not have scrubs, man. It was Virgil Parch, and it was Milt Caniff, and it was like Al Cap. Like, you know, I can go grab
amazing.
it.
It's amazing.
It's all the best. I mean, that's how I discovered who Virgil Parch was. And I love this piece right here. We need to scan that and send that to Caitlin McGurk and the crew at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Art Library, because you always forget, like, you take it for granted. Billy Ireland is just what it's called. But, like, Billy Ireland's a dude that influenced fucking Milt Caniff.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, worth noting, like, Howard Cruz, known for Stuck Rubber Baby.
Yeah.
Before that. This is before
absolutely.
that, you know, so like earlier on in his career, before he makes the big piece that he's known for.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting to kind of like read it with that perspective.
Yeah, but he was still getting bones, dude, with his underground works.
Yeah, definitely. Very tight cartoonist too. Not a lot of examples. You can see a little bit here, but very tight in his detail and stuff like that.
When he's doing black and white.
Talks about meeting Caniff in New York, going to visit him, and what that experience is like, and how different maybe the reality of cartooning is versus what he dreamt of as a kid.
Yeah. But Caniff afforded him some opportunity, man. Like, and said, like, you get your chops up. Like, because I think the lunch that he got with him was also with